kickstart the recording. So yeah, we have the recording on now, and since it is 9 a.m., I was going to pass it off to Sam to kick us started with the agenda. And I should probably introduce myself really quick. My name's Henry Sweat. I'm the lead staff from Safety Policy Division on this proceeding. Welcome to everyone. And then I'm passing it to Sam Stonerock, who is kind of facilitating this meeting today. And he is, I believe, the head of the GO95 committee. And he also has worked at Edison for a long time. So with that, I will pass it to Sam.
Henry, this is Jacob from Jacob from IT. You were breaking up there for a moment when you were speaking at first.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, my name's Henry Sweat, and I am the lead staff person from Safety Policy Division on this particular proceeding. Today, Sam Stonerock, who is the head of the GO95 Rules Committee, will be kind of leading the meeting. He also works for Southern California Edison. And so with that, I will pass it off to him to facilitate the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Your first introduction mentioned that I've been working for Edison for a long time. That is true. It's not just the gray hair that should give me away. Looking at the list of folks that have joined the call, it almost feels like a friends and family call, with the exception of Commissioner Baker, who I've not had the pleasure of meeting before or working with before. Many of you I have in various forums and various commission proceedings. So yes, I do work for Southern California Edison, and yes, I do chair the GO95 128 Rules Committee in California that developed the proposed rule changes that were submitted by Edison on behalf of the committee in the petition. One of the things that we're going to talk about today, at the request of Safety Policy Division, we had a preliminary call a week or two ago to talk about the agenda and content. And we added an item to it from the original that I circulated to the IOUs and to safety policy. We're going to have a short discussion. Right now, it's on the agenda as item I to talk a little bit about how the strength and load factors for GO95 were developed by the committee and its members and contributing engineers. And also an example of how the load and resistance factor design methodology could be used in GO95 rules compared to the current assumed stress design that's throughout GO95, and with examples in Appendix F. The reason I mention it now is because if all goes well, we will not run past noon or 12:30. But our consulting engineer, who also does work occasionally for Edison, does work for San Diego, probably does work for PG&E on things that I don't know about. Andy Stewart, he's calling in from his offices in, or perhaps his home in Fort Collins, Colorado, and he has a conflict today at noon our time. So I'm going to do a time check around 11:15-ish or so, because I think we may spend 30 minutes on that item alone. I will make sure that he's available for that. So the agenda that I put out and was circulated, we may jump around a little bit if we need to make sure that we can address that item while Andy is available. So otherwise, I plan to go through the agenda as it is. And with that, I'd like to welcome everybody that has joined and is joining in progress. My assumption is, by the way, that we will have attorneys joining throughout the morning. 9 o'clock is really early for a lot of the attorneys in the industry that I know. So they may have some challenges getting on at 9 o'clock. So we'll see, but we'll see how it goes. Right now, it didn't look like a mob.
But Sam, your attorney is on the line. Sam, your attorney is on the line.
Yeah, of course.
Time.
Yes, of course.
Good morning, everybody.
So, if as we go through this, and by the way, for those of us now, since COVID sort of forced us into hybrid and virtual meetings almost exclusively, I think we've all become very expert at using these virtual meeting platforms There is a raised hand feature that we would like you to use. I have a couple of things going on my very small screen. I don't have access to a large screen today because I'm working out of an office instead of my home that does have a larger screen. So if I don't see something in the chat or I don't see a hand raised, perhaps Henry or somebody else can mention it and then we can go to it. So you may hear me ask, does anybody have anything to say? Because I'm not seeing the hands raised, or I'm not seeing somebody waving wildly from their video. The issue today that we're going to get to is going to be the agenda that we put out, mainly, at least from our perspective as the IOUs. It looked like the commission was looking for a procedural path forward for how to address the proposed rule changes. And I am going to give Commissioner Baker as much time as he would like this morning to address parties as soon as I get through these few top bullet items. Just as a matter of safety, if you are driving, just be careful. And we would recommend that you not drive while you listen to the call or try to talk on the call. Certainly it's your choice. Everybody's grown up and can do what they need to do. But if there does become a safety issue, or if you do need assistance, do interrupt, do chat. If there's anything that anybody on the call can do to help, like call 911 for you or do anything for you, do let us know. Also, because we expect parties to fill in as the call goes on, if you do want to be recognized as attending this workshop, we are asking that you put your name or your company name into the chat. That way, in the workshop report, we can say that Edison attended, PG&E attended, et cetera, or your company, or your individual if you're representing yourself, or if you just want to be recognized and you want your name published, that's fine too. We'll put it in there. We'll put it in the workshop report for you. Also, usually in in-person meetings, we talk about the turning off devices and so forth so we don't hear rings. If you were at home and we hear your dog bark or the cat jumps onto your laptop, I don't think there's anything we haven't seen before. So don't be too embarrassed. Life happens, especially when you're working at home. And I think we'll skip the self-introduction part, except for Commissioner Baker. If you would like to address the parties, and if you are monitoring and listening, I'd very much like to give you the opportunity to address the parties and any other commissioners or staff, or perhaps if ALJ, the assigned to ALJ is on the call. Very happy to give you some time now. So I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thanks, Sam. It's really wonderful to meet you. Good morning, everybody. And thank you for joining us to discuss GO95 modernization. Broadly speaking, what we're looking to do is determine whether changes are necessary to modernize the rules and regulations governing the design and construction of overhead electric and communications facilities in California. The modernization proposal that's been put forth by the GO95 Rules Committee and Southern California Edison is to incorporate the load and resistance factor design, or the LRFD, into how the overhead infrastructure is designed. According to the petition, LRFD is the methodology taught in U.S. engineering schools and is currently used across the country. I think from our perspective, the careful design and construction of overhead facilities really has never been more important in our state. Between 2016 and 2020, about 8% of the wildfires in California were caused by overhead electric infrastructure. And while this is a relatively small percentage, many of these fires have been some of the most destructive. Because of the potentially extreme consequences for failure, maintaining a high level of safety is key when assessing any proposed rule changes. I really appreciate the work and the collaboration that the GO95 Rules Committee has engaged in to develop this proposal. I think it's kind of a model that is useful in other settings as well. I look forward to learning more about the changes over the course of the proceeding. And, with that, I'm just going to hand it back to you, Sam, and thanks for having me here. I'm not going to be able to stay the whole time, but I'll try to stay as long as I can.
No, I appreciate that, Commissioner. And by the way, if you do have any questions throughout, and I guess I could put you a little bit on the spot now. If you've had a chance to review the agenda, are we directionally correct in our assessment that the purpose of this IOU-led workshop is to develop a path forward for vetting the proposed rule changes in a manner that the commission can make good decisions on? I mean, like how to move forward as parties in the proceeding?
Yeah, I think that's critical. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, that's what we're trying to do this morning. Thank you, Commissioner. And just for and I guess I should ask. I can't see the whole list of everybody there, but I know that we had a reassignment to I think ALJ Perez Green yesterday, and I don't know if the ALJ is on the call and would like to speak or not. I can't see the whole list, but if not, it's okay. Okay. But if the ALJ does come on and does want to add in, certainly, like this is going to be a fairly relaxed workshop. This is I've run many workshops in commission proceedings. I have a long history of doing so, and perhaps my style is not the same style as everybody else's that you've become accustomed to. And it's been a while since we've had a GO95 rulemaking. The last one we had was started in 2017, and we got a decision in 2020, mainly I think because of the wildfire outbreaks that we had in 2018 and all the energy focused on wildfire mitigation plans and so forth. So there were things that bubbled to the top. Obviously, the priority list at the commission and things that were in progress did get delayed a little bit. But we've done this a few times before, just strictly for GO95 rule changes brought forward by the committee. We've also worked as parties for many times, especially in the wildfire safety proceedings, the one that started in 2008 and was closed and reopened in 2015, and finally finished up in 2018. It's actually still open because of the wildfire maps. But we got our last decision in that December of 2017 for GO95 rule changes prior to the new rulemaking that we did in 17 that ended in 20. So we have a new one now, and based on those experiences and others that we've had in other proceedings prior to the wildfire safety proceeding, what I'm looking to do today is go through a proposed path forward, possible path forward, and how we as parties could address that. There are obviously many ways to get this done. The IOUs believe that one of the best ways to do, especially on technical rules, is to meet in person, possibly with a hybrid option at some point, to make sure that when we do more legal and regulatory discussions around rules, and we start thinking about taking votes as far as parties go about, like, do we approve of the proposed rule change, or is there an option, or we have alternative versions of a proposed rule change to give to the commission to think about. As we're going to get into the agenda a little bit deeper, you're going to see that we also have a set of protocols that are attached to the back. And these are sort of the ground rules that we've used in many proceedings before where we've had technical workshops and also non-technical workshops, but mainly technical workshops, so that we know that when we start, where we are in the process and how we know we finished, and everybody's had a chance to review and understand and vote on a proposed rule change, or bring forward an alternative proposed rule change for the commission to consider. Sometimes alternative proposed rule changes are they're very slight changes. Could be a word here, a word there. It's not a punctuation issue typically, but we're going to talk about those protocols. So this agenda today, as we get into it, and as I start drilling in, the things that at a high level that we're going to talk about as a path forward is first and foremost, we have two sets of proposed rule changes, one that was submitted in the petition and another that was submitted following the petition and the opening of the proceeding by Edison on behalf of the Rules Committee, that were supplemental proposed rule changes. And you might be wondering why the two sets of proposed rule changes. And quite frankly, from a Rules Committee perspective, we had done what we thought was a fairly comprehensive review of the technical rules, especially those in Section 4 of GO 95, where we had to look at, well, if we don't use assumed stress design and the word safety factor and the word and how that verbiage applies in other rules, let's work on those first. And if the commission, then we find the commission is amenable to discussing the integration of the LRFD methodology into GO 95. Our view as industry, the committee itself, was that we could then, as parties, separate parties, or perhaps with or without the Rules Committee guidance, could then work on other peripheral rules that are not technical in nature, but do use, like, for example, use the word safety factor. We could also talk about, like, in workshops, whether or not and how the editorial changes to the GOs could occur, what those editorial changes or ministerial changes are, such as the indexes and so forth, the tables of contents. And those are all things that do have to occur along with revised rule changes, because often titles rules change, not just the content. So those sort of changes the committee did not address. And so although we did feel like we submitted a fairly comprehensive set of technical rules, our view was that if the commission did decide to open a rulemaking, which they have now done, there would be other things that needed to be talked about and other rules that would need to be addressed. And so the rules that Edison submitted in their comments on the PD, those were addressed by the Rules Committee. They were not voted out officially, but those were other rules that we thought were important because they used the word safety factor. And it has not been decided whether or not the term of art safety factor will still be needed in GO 95 with the use of LRFD, or if it is, in what limited sense it may be used. So right now, as I sit here today, the only proposed rule changes that we're looking at for this proceeding, technical rules and associated rules to those technical rules, are those submitted by Edison. And so at this point in time, I would just wanted to open up the floor to parties to see if anybody on the call anticipates the need or has in hand or intends, or perhaps even intends to submit in comments to this workshop report additional proposed rule changes related to LRFD. So that's my opening spiel and my jump ball question for parties. So if we have parties on the call that believe that there are other proposed rule changes, and we don't need the specifics of them now, I think what I'm looking for is just sort of like scope and volume. If there's a few, if there's a lot, it would help us as we present this report to the commission that there could be other things in mind, and that the parties may have other proposals to make in comments, or perhaps during the workshops that some may come up organically. So I'll open the floor now. I don't see the hands, Henry, but if you do, then certainly we can start calling on hands, raised hands.
Perfect. I don't see any raised hands yet, but I am
Okay.
looking for them.
Well, if we're not going to use raised hands, I guess we'll just let the first one that gets off of mute jump in there. I'm not going to stand on too much formality, but
I see.
raised hand is the way to go.
I see a raised hand from Jerome Kendall area.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, Sam. Actually, it's simply a revised question. You asked for any expected rule changes specific to LRFD, and I'd be curious to know if anyone plans to use this as a vehicle for GO95 proposals beyond LRFD.
Right. That question is coming next, and I'm glad you raised it. If we don't have any parties on the call today, and by the way, I expect that there may be some after that say like, oh, I should have said this or I should have said that, or maybe they're still thinking about it or debating it in their companies. I know how utilities and company bureaucracies work, and it can be very difficult sometimes for companies to get an idea out onto paper and then in front of the commission after all the checks and balances and reviews. So if you don't have anything for us today, we can certainly proceed with the notion that right now the proposed rule changes on the table are those submitted in the petition developed by the Rules Committee, and those developed and reviewed by the Rules Committee but not voted on that were submitted by Edison in comments. If that is today's scope of proposed rule changes for LRFD, then the next question is, were there other GO95 proposed rule changes for GO95 that companies may wish to put forward to the commission? And if so, if they're not related to LRFD, then the question becomes, is it appropriate? And this is, by the way, this is a decision for the commission to make, not me and not us on this call. But the question becomes, are there other proposed changes for GO95 that parties may be interested in? And you don't have to name the rule, and we don't have to go down the long winding road of what the proposal is and why it's necessary. But if there are, I think it might have been brought up in comments. I think Edison might have mentioned that there might be a change to GO95 Rule 18 it might be interested in. I think other parties may have mentioned there might be some other changes to GO95 they might be interested in. And if so, we can certainly mention that in the workshop report. And then parties can then address whether or not they think it should be encapsulated into one whole proceeding, or whether or not it could be bifurcated and work on LRFD first, other GO95 rule changes in a separate track or phase of this proceeding, or perhaps even in a separate proceeding. So thank you, Jerome, for teeing that up. I definitely want to open that question now as well. Do any of the parties on the call anticipate seeking other changes to GO95 that are not related to LRFD? That would be the question.
Actually, Sam, I'd like to jump in on that. I think that today we want to focus mostly on additional rules related to LRFD, and I think the comments that have already been submitted as part of the opening and reply comments, there was kind of an opportunity to discuss those particular rule changes outside of the scope of this workshop, which I think is meant to be more focused on LRFD. I'll pause. I see Commissioner Baker has his hand up. Commissioner Baker, I believe you're muted.
Yeah. There we go.
Henry, I'm going to let you finish, because I just wanted to add on to what you say and talk a little bit about how I see the proceeding, and you're headed in the exact right direction. So.
Yeah, I think to the point here, I'm glad we raised this, because if parties wish to add in additional comments in their workshop comments, they're welcome to add that in. But I definitely think today we want to kind of follow the agenda, which is mostly focused on the LRFD proposed rule changes. And I did have a couple of questions that I had on the proposed rule changes that I thought it might be a good opportunity for me to ask those questions. But before I do that, I'll pause and pass it off to Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a couple words on how I see this proceeding and how I generally try to look at rulemakings in general. And I think it's really important, particularly on something that is as wide-ranging as GO95, that we really try to keep this as tightly focused as possible. and scoped as tightly focused. And I can't speak for my colleagues, but I voted for this rulemaking, really looking at the specific proposals that have come forward, knowing that they have gone through some process, and really just thinking about how are these going to be vetted to make sure that everything works for everybody else. That is not to say we don't necessarily oppose a new rulemaking on a set of other issues. But I think this proceeding is one that we really just want, at least I really want to try to keep it as tightly scoped as possible. So I'll stop. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Really do. That helps us move forward today for sure. Henry, was there something that you wanted to mention before we close this item? And I think to tie the knot on this, Henry, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but if we're going to stay focused in this call on and apparently we don't have any additional LRFD proposals at the moment to talk about. Certainly, I don't have any in front of me that anybody has submitted in comments. But if we're going to stay focused on LRFD in this proceeding, then I agree with you. Then, if somebody wants to say something in comments, they definitely have the opportunity, and we don't need to spend any time on it here. Other than the fact that if they just want to say, "Oh, I've got some stuff," that's all I was getting at. We weren't going to go down a laundry list of things that somebody wanted to talk about. It was just going to be a very I just wanted to mention it so we could get it in the workshop report. So please continue.
Understood. Thank you. When I reviewed the proposed petition, I noted a couple of locations where there was still, and I want to just preface this with saying, I understand, from your introduction that that when you guys submitted this petition, the goal was to hit, the biggest picture items to see what it would look like and go back later and correct it. So I'm not being critical. I want to make sure that I'm just kind of asking follow-up questions on the petition. So one thing that I noticed is there were a couple of locations where I saw continued references to working stresses that I haven't seen updated. The example I have off the top of my head is I think it's 48.1.C.1.B that where it has conductor fastenings is the heading for it, and it mentions for supply conductor fastenings, there's 40% of the maximum working tensions, but not more than 500 pounds. And what I'm wondering is the long-term goal, at least as you guys, what you guys have been discussing, is your long-term goal to kind of edit out that maximum working tension, or do you know if that, if that's something that we may need to be updated as part of the transition and it just hasn't gotten to yet, or yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think we might address that partially in Andy Stewart's presentation towards the end of the agenda. But at a high level, I can tell you that, again, that we wanted to get the most bang for our buck for the proposals that we wrote and put in, understanding that so far as we could tell, and in the past, the best written proposed rule change with our best intent. Very often when we sit down with parties that do not routinely meet with the Rules Committee or did not have a chance to meet with us and or was not part of the meet and confer process, which we held with SED, there are parties that come in with questions and concerns and what about this and what about that? And those things are typically resolved in technical workshops, which is one of the reasons why we would propose technical workshops to work through that exact same issue. It wasn't that we were trying to avoid it. It was one of those things we felt in technical workshops, assuming that we got the ball rolling and assuming that the commission said, yes, let's work on this. And apparently we are going to work on a narrowly scoped set of proposals. The core of all the proposals that came from the Rules Committee for Section 4 is Rule 44. And so once we get through Rule 44 in the technical workshops and in the proceeding, there will be a little bit of light lifting, I don't think heavy lifting to do, to make sure that we get the terminology correct. Like working stress is not part of LRFD, but we do think it is resolvable. And it's not just a matter of like whether or not we use the word safety factor or not. So yes, there are still some, I wouldn't want to minimize anything, but there are still some technical issues like the words working stress to resolve. And we believe that the best way to do that for the state and for the commission was to do that in technical workshops. So we saw that, we knew it, we were trying to be very timely with our filing. We were trying to, and by the way, we waited quite a while. Like we were probably ready to submit the petition well before early 2004. We didn't do so mainly with an eye for what was going on at the commission and not upsetting other proceedings in the equilibrium where the commission was considering other quasi-technical matters. So we were looking for some clear water, so to speak, at the commission, looking at their calendar and looking at the things that were already in progress before we submitted the petition, so that we thought we would have time as industry to vet these correctly. Yes, that is one, like working stress design or working stress terminology is one of the things that we will need to address, but we thought that would be addressed in technical workshops.
Okay, good to know. I think that's really key to kind of draw wow what I heard from you, which is that there are still some there, beyond what's maybe been initially proposed. The GO95 Rules Committee still sees that there still seems to indicate that there's more areas that may need to be updated.
Yep.
So okay, thank you for kind of verifying that for me. I think I referenced a really long citation earlier, but I think for those for an easier citation, if anyone's interested in the kind of question I was asking, 48.2, which is the section about steel, still has an allowable stress reference in it. So just a little bit of an easier citation to follow if anyone in the future kind of wants to look back on the question I was asking. So thanks, Sam. With that, I think most of my questions on this particular topic have been answered. I see Jerome has his hand up. And Jerome, I'm sorry, I don't know you. If you don't mind identifying like your party when
yes, thank
hold
you.
on, and everyone else as you pop on, that would be awesome as well.
Thank you, Henry. I'm Jerome Candelaria from the Cal Broadband, California Broadband and Video Association. So thanks. We talked about the scope and we heard from the commissioner about the need to maintain this type, a tight scope related to what was proposed. It's my sense, though, that the proposed changes submitted by Edison and the comments in Cal Broadband's pleadings underscore the importance of incorporating the retroactive related rules, Rule 12, as part of the scope of this proceeding. So that would be our expectation, because the question of retroactivity kind of really shapes just what all of these changes will mean for those who attach and those who build poles. So I just wanted to put out there to make clear to understand if the commission views that as not within scope. If so, I think we need to pursue that at greater length, the implications. I mean, I think it's all scoped out in Edison and Cal Broadband's comments, but I wanted to be clear as to whether Rule 12 will be within scope.
I definitely can't speak for the commission like at this time, but I think when we're talking about out of scope things, I think we're definitely what at least I'm trying to reference is something totally unrelated to implementation of LRFD. And so I think your comment is definitely like the exact intent of the discussion for today is to try to tease out if we are implementing LRFD, then Rule 12 is something that we may want to think about. So I'm definitely not making a decision on that, but I think that the way that you phrased your comment, that's the kind of comment that we're looking for today, at least from my perspective. So,
thank you.
And Jerome, and also for Commissioner Baker and others from the commission, in past proceedings, depending on the assigned commissioner and ALJ, we've had a variety of checkpoints or touch points, if you will, in workshop reports that were written into the scope of the proceeding that the commission wanted to touch on. My general assumption that if the commission wants to address retroactivity, I mean, it's been brought up here, I assume it will appear in comments to the report on this particular workshop. That other things that would be in scope is like time of implementation, cost of implementation, other things that go along with changes to GO 95, besides retroactivity and so forth. Whether I wasn't planning on bringing up those particular items in this workshop because those are general that are addressed routinely by the commission in scoping memos. But I do believe that parties, if they feel strongly about a certain topic and think that it should be addressed in a scoping memo, I assume that is part of the reason, or at least partially the reason, that there would be comments to this workshop report. So I don't think, I wasn't intending to go through every single thing that should be in scope for this proceeding. That I didn't feel like that was my job in this workshop. But I do think that parties that do have a strong opinion or want to give the commission something to think about, I think we will have comment period, opening and reply comments to this workshop report. Appears that there will be ample opportunity for parties to weigh in on that and other items that are on their minds. But I wasn't planning to drill into that, but I'm happily to have it teed up here.
Awesome. I see Fadi also has his hand raised.
Oh, hi, Fadi.
Hi, Sam. Yeah, Sam, the agenda contains item about doing some technical calculation in this workshop. Mm-hmm. WSD, okay, SED oppose this, and we don't support this calculation because we think this calculation should be left to all the technical workshop because it's technical work. And the second reason you're conducting these calculations on an appendix that's not even a rule, and it's misleading because the idea is to show that LRFD will not change anything and it will provide the same level of safety currently in GO 95. We disagree on this. We think if you are to apply any calculation that's favorable to LRFD methodology, then you also have to show a different calculation that show how such methodology reduces the safety that's currently provided by GO 95. So this calculation is very misleading to the participant in this workshop.
So we're talking about which item on the agenda, Bonnie?
No, you said you want to do calculation WSD versus LRFD to show that nothing will change, right?
Well,
that's
we were okay. Well, I'm just saying I was planning on doing that because we were asked by Safety Policy Division to include it. It wasn't on my original agenda. So, so if we're talking now about whether or not we should continue with the agenda that we have, we can back up a step. You're suggesting that we hold those discussions until we have technical workshops?
Yes, because if you want to show something that's favorable to RFD to change opinion, maybe, well, then let's show also calculation that's not favorable to RFD.
Okay. Well, I get what you're saying. I understand. So you're objecting to item I, where we do like a review of LRFD and examples, comparisons to Appendix F?
Correct.
In this workshop?
Yes, in this workshop, yes. I think this should be left to the technical workshops.
Fair enough. No, I appreciate that. So the person that asked for it is on the call. I don't know exactly how to address that. Henry, you have a division within the commission that would like to withhold, any comparisons or discussions on how the load and how the load and strength factors got developed. I guess there's two parts to that though, Fadi. Let me ask you before I ask Henry this question. One of the present parts of the presentation is how we came to develop the separation of load and strength factors. That's part of the discussion. And then another part of the discussion behind that, not first, but secondarily to that, would be an example of an Appendix F calculation with ASD or WSD and LRFD. So do you have any objection to a discussion on how the Rules Committee developed the strength and loading factors? Is that problematic for you?
No, it's not. The problematic factor is Appendix F itself.
Okay. All right. Got that. So Henry, since we're all now fast friends and everybody's still in a friendly mood, let me ask you: Are you okay, Henry, with not delving into comparisons now and holding that for technical workshops?
Hadi, I guess when I asked them for this, my thought was that it would help understand where the load committee's perspective is coming from when doing the petition, which would allow further discussion on. I've read some of your comments and kind of further allow commenters to kind of start suggesting making suggestions or commenting on this. And so are you willing to just kind of sustain your have your objection noted in the workshop technical report, and we go through it, and it allows people to kind of comment on understanding that this is kind of the perspective that the Rules Committee is coming to the table with, and kind of helping us set up for the technical working groups, kind of helping them focus in on these kind of issues that you're talking about? Or do you still object and feel like this should be stricken to the technical working group?
I think this should be strictly handled by the technical workshops, because this calculation is very misleading if you compare it with something else. So, and I understand that this calculation will sway opinion. It's going to show that, there's no difference whether you apply the safety factor or LRFD, you're gonna get the same result, and that's incorrect.
Okay. So I think, considering the objection has been raised, I'm okay with deferring this for the technical working group, this particular portion. I'm still really interested in hearing a little bit about how the proposed strength and load factors were developed.
Okay, fair enough.
And Henry,
ahead,
if you want, we can work with you to show you those calculations outside this workshop.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So if I don't see the full list, but if Andy Stewart is still on the call and monitoring, then we did not pre-circulate the presentation that was put together at your request, Henry. But this will allow opportunity for Andy to just go through the first portion of the presentation about how the strength and load factors were developed, and then we'll just stop there.
Thank you. And I'll just note for the teams, it seems like we've closed from item D. I didn't see any more hands up related to that when I was trying to find them. Sorry if I missed anyone's hand, but I just want to make sure I didn't miss a raised hand before we move on to item I.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. So before we get to I think we need to go back up a little bit to F, and I'm still being cognizant of time. I think we're moving through the agenda rather quickly, and so and it's only 9:45, so we can take a break at 10 o'clock if we need it. But I'd like to continue to push forward before we start talking about G, which is a potential calendar of events for technical workshops, and how the when and the how of technical workshops. And before we get into that, I would like to look at the workshop protocols, because I think it matters to the workshops and how they're conducted, just to give parties an opportunity. I assume that parties have had a chance to review it. Those that have been working on these matters for the past few years will recognize this particular set of protocols. They've been used in very many proceedings where we've had technical discussions throughout the fire safety proceedings, other GO 95 rulemakings. It has its birthplace in a GO 95 128 proceeding dating back to 2001, where these protocols were developed roughly and then more formally put into writing based on past experience. So I just wanted to run through these quickly, and that that the protocols as they are established would be reviewed again prior to technical workshops, to make sure that everybody understands what the ground rules are for when we meet, both technically to review the technical aspects of rules. In past proceedings, we've done technical working groups, and then those technical working groups have come together with attorneys and regulatory and policy people from the parties' companies and from the commission, if they weren't part of the technical workshops. And so the attorneys and regulatory folks could review the outcome of any technical discussions, any particular modifications to a proposed rule change. And then at that point, they would be vetted from both a legal and regulatory and perhaps even, if necessary, procedural level. And the proposed rule changes would then be voted on. So these protocols are actually just a way to make sure that parties understand that their involvement is meaningful, how we would go through the process of defining participants, agendas, of course, being submitted, the discussion principles about why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and to make sure that we stay inside the guardrails and we don't spin off into many other avenues, which is we found over the years is a very easy thing to do when we're talking about the way a particular company might view, or a particular entity might view a regulation or a rule or the application. And very often we start connecting the dots and it takes us off path. So these discussion principles and how we make decisions as parties in the workshops are all included in the protocols. Anybody, like I said, anybody that's been working on these things in past proceedings that I've been involved with, which many of the folks on the call have, these are not new. They might be new to some folks that are new to this arena, or new to this sort of rulemaking, technical rulemaking. So these might be slightly different than other ground rules and protocols been followed in other workshops, but I can tell you that they have been time tested, and it does allow for all the parties to be heard. It does allow for parties to bring alternative proposals so that the commission can judge whether or not the original proposal or one or more alternative proposals are the best way to go. So it allows everybody's voice to be heard, everybody have a chance, equal chance to vote on a proposal and express their opinions on it, so the commission can have a full record of what the discussions were and how we got from one rule change proposal and reached consensus on it totally, or we had a change proposal that did not reach consensus, but we might have a majority view, a minority view, and alternative proposals to it. So this set of protocols, I do have some examples of workshop reports, and I think I included them in the agenda, where these protocols were used, what the workshop reports looked like, how the voting protocols were presented, how comments to the voting protocols and all the votes that were taken were presented. And it can create a rather lengthy workshop report. However, it is very thorough. And so these protocols drive us to that outcome in technical workshops. So I put those out there. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read them or reread them, but I did want to open up the floor to anybody that had any questions or concerns or comments about these protocols. I don't expect them to be perfect as they're presented, but I would say that I teed them up here not to grind off or make changes to them today, but if in this workshop report I can say, or we the parties can, the IOUs can say, this was teed up, it was brought up for discussion, and if parties have comments or concerns with the protocols, they can certainly address them in comments. But more importantly, I think, is that if and when technical workshops are ordered and the dates are set, and we do technical workshops and meetings, one of the first orders of business in those workshops would be to make sure that the protocols, that we all agree on the protocols, and any changes to the protocols occur to everybody's satisfaction before we start the workshops. And that would be one of the first orders of business in technical workshops. So this is really just a straw man, although I tried to make it as complete as I could and as accurate as I could. There may be some other changes to it in the future. So I did want to open up to comments and questions about the workshop protocols that were attached to the agenda. And so we'd have that discussion right now. And if there are any hands up or somebody just wants to jump in, very happy to address those now.
Sam, this is Justin Nguyen from CMUA. I was just
Hi,
wondering,
Justin.
are you anticipating that the either hybrid or virtual nature will affect this? And what I'm thinking of is, if it is hybrid, are we going to allow people that are only participating virtually to vote, or will voting require you to be in the room?
Oh, well, that's a good question. That is not embedded. That's a great question. I think we'll have to decide when we decide on what kind of workshops we're going to have. I do believe, Justin, that we're in the mode of operation now that, though many of us that work on technical rules do prefer in-person meetings for various reasons, there's going to be, out of necessity, a virtual option. So I tend to view those meetings as hybrid meetings. And so if we're going to have hybrid technical meetings, I could foresee that we also have hybrid voting meetings where they're the non-technical, more regulatory, legal, let's take a vote type meeting that probably will be hybrid as well. And in those situations, the way the protocols are written, each party would have one vote. It won't be based on how many, folks are in the room. It will be one party, one vote. And so in that situation, I don't think it really matters if we're in hybrid or in person. So yes, I think a hybrid meeting, if a party could only attend virtually and not in person, that they definitely would be allowed to vote. That's how I view it anyway. Any other questions about the protocols?
I have a question. I think this, so when the decision-making process or the voting is set up, I had a couple kind of questions on how it works. So if a party is unable to attend, does their vote not count, or how does that end up working itself out?
We can assign proxies if we want to.
Okay. And if they don't have any representative at the meeting, does their vote later get count through comments, or do they generally, it's not considered a,
Well, it's a good question, and there's a two-part voting process. The way the protocols are set up, the initial vote is, I'm in a meeting, I like what I see as a representative to the meeting, either, like the technical person, and by the way, like some parties will bring many people to the technical workshops and also the legal regulatory voting meeting. And those meetings can be self-facilitated. In the past, we've had the ALJ facilitate the voting meeting, and the parties have met beforehand, and pretty much everybody knows where they stand. And the voting meeting is just like the formality of the official hand yes, hand no, hand I don't care vote. But there's two votes. One is the preliminary vote, where I'm at this meeting, I like what I see, I'm voting yes or no or maybe, or I'm not objecting. And then that's the first vote. And then there's time between that first vote and the final vote for the parties to go back and reconsider, talk with their management, talk with other people in their companies, make sure that they, had the right vision, explain it, and everything is like either good or not good. And then there'll be a second vote. And with that vote, there will obviously be some discussion. And I don't remember if I linked to a workshop report where the vote also had some discussion about why they voted yes or no, or why they didn't object. But the workshop report can reflect in the final vote that yes, I voted yes, or I voted no, and here's why. And then there's post-vote and post-workshop report. There's always been an opportunity for parties to comment on the workshop report to explain further. So we don't usually allow in the voting report 14 pages of why I voted no. It can just be a couple of sentences just so they can do it. But between the first and second vote, we wanted to give parties the opportunity to consider their vote before the final vote. And the final votes are established in the calendar. So that's why when we start talking about dates of workshops, why there always has to be a closing workshop. And that closing workshop is the final vote on any matters that have not yet been voted on. So it can be a lengthy process if you have a lot of proposed rule changes to go through, or if there's a lot of contention. It can take more than a few weeks to get through that. But the very first vote doesn't generally occur at the first set of workshops. Usually everybody's getting warmed up. We get through technical matters. Then we start dealing with, maybe we don't even deal with the legal and regulatory review of the first set of meetings. But after the second meeting, there's an expectation that certain proposals have been thoroughly vetted by the technical people, the legal and regulatory people look at it. There's a vote, and it's a preliminary vote. Then a meeting or two later, there's a final vote. And once the final vote is taken, we don't reopen the proposed rule changes. If there is going to be any more discussion on them, It's only going to be after the workshop report is submitted in comments or hearings or whatever occurs after the fact. So it's a 2-vote process.
Then one other question that I had is, have you found that encoding these workshop protocols, in the scoping meeting, kind of setting out a process for how this is to happen is helpful? Or do you think that the flexibility of being able to work on the fly is more helpful? And, I'm open in this question to anyone.
Yeah, I obviously have an opinion on it, but there's many people on the call that have been involved with this for many years, along with me. So be happy to have them weigh in as well.
And I know it's tough at the moment to come up with it, but if anyone has comments on the process raised here, or the what was submitted as part of the agenda, any information in your follow-up workshop comments would be great. So thank you.
Yep. And Henry, I'm not sure. Commissioner Baker, it looks like, has left the call. And I don't know if anybody else from his office or the assigned ALJ are on, but
Hey, Sam.
I could anticipate.
This is Justin Hagler.
Oh.
I'm the advisor to Commissioner Baker. So yeah, I'm in attendance and will be
Good
for
morning.
the remainder of the workshop. And good morning.
Okay. Good morning. I have been around this for a while, and I've seen a lot of variations of this, and a lot of it, I thought I understood, but probably don't. I could also foresee a pre-hearing conference being held after the workshop report is submitted and after the comments to the workshop report are in. If the commissioner ALJ has specific questions, if it's not a pre-hearing conference, there could be some written questions directed to the parties and want some answers instead of a pre-hearing conference. So I think, Henry, to your question, if we don't cover something in this agenda and the commission wants more specificity, my presumption is they can ask or hold a pre-hearing conference and ask the parties in person or virtually or in a meeting or in direct questions to us. Then we can be more specific.
Thank you. And to be clear, I'm not speaking on behalf of the commission. This is just my internal wanting to learn more on how,
Sure.
How you've seen this work well in the past. So thank you.
Sure. Okay. So if there's no other comments or kicks or concerns about the protocols, and by the way, if somebody does think of something and we want to cycle back and we have time, I'd be happy to cycle back on it. About, again, not trying to amend or do any edits on the fly. Those are the sort of things that we'll look at the protocols. My presumption is that parties would look at the protocols at the first meeting and we'd all agree to them, and then we'd move on and start the process. And that's based on experience and what we've done in the past, just to make sure that we all knew the guardrails. And by now, many parties have done this a few times, but those that haven't, we're definitely not going to go so fast that somebody can't ask questions and we can't make changes if we need to. So I'd like to move on to item G and talk about future technical workshops for LRFD proposed rule changes. The question here.
Sam, I did have one question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. We've been using the term parties here in these public workshops where stakeholders, but not necessarily parties, participate. So it sounds like you're maybe deferring the precision of the process to the first meeting, which I view isn't this one, it's the next workshop. My point is I don't think we could presume that all stakeholders are necessarily formal parties for these workshops.
Oh, that's a good point.
that was it. And we could take that up in the next round when we, if there's an issue there. I don't know if there is, but
Okay. No, that's
okay.
that's good. And by the way, we I don't see the full list. I was kind of like looking through the chat to see who had signed in for themselves to be recognized in the workshop report. And this meeting itself, this particular workshop might have flown under some folks' radar, maybe not. But what, Jerome, to your point, we have seen technical workshops, folks come in and attend public workshops that are noticed, and go to 1 or 2 workshops, and then we don't see them again. And they just came in for a certain topic, or they just came in for a certain thing. And maybe they're not even parties. They just wanted to attend and see what was going on. So my recollection, Jerome, is that when we had these protocols, they were for parties, not stakeholders. Am I remembering that correctly?
You know, I'm thinking of the ones around Malibu and persons we recall from Malibu who weren't always parties, but still exercised votes. I know that changed over the course of, but yeah. I just wanted to flag that there could be a distinction there.
All right. No, that's fair. And I think we can address that in the protocols, right?
And Sam, this is Justin Wynn again, because this is relevant to us because obviously there's CMUA, the Trade Association for POUs. I anticipate having individual POU members as subject matter experts that are participating. My recollection is that we would still vote on a one vote per party basis.
That's right.
I guess it's relevant to us because we will likely have a variety of different POU participants, but I viewed them as I viewed it as still being 1 vote per party. But I'm open to other thoughts, and I don't recall how we handled it in the past.
In the past, like where we have a trade association, like or an association, like now Cal Broadband and CMUA and others, CTIA comes to mind, and some others. They might represent like wireless industry or cable or broadband or municipal utilities, but the way we set up protocols in the past, my recollection was that CMUA as an entity would have a vote, as would like LAWP or SMUD, just like with Cal Broadband, formerly CCTA. There would be cable companies involved, and CCTA in some cases had a separate vote, but individual companies did. And I think we can, like, I'd have to go back and look at the voting protocols of past meetings, but we can decide it. We can decide it as a group what's the appropriate forum. But typically, I think you're right, Justin. If memory serves, it was individual entities had the vote, like a SMUD or an LA DWP, and not just CMUA for them.
And my recollection is that they were actually parties. Whereas if there was a POU that was not a party, they wouldn't be having a separate vote as a stakeholder.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep, that's my recollection too. And we can, and when we get together to go through the protocols, we can certainly look through past history. I don't know why we would change a lot from historical precedent, but there may be a reason to. But we can certainly go back and look at past workshop reports and siphon that out.
Yeah, I guess I think it worked before, so I don't know that there's a need for a change. But if there are non-party stakeholders, then I think that it raises questions on our side. If so, like what was mentioned before, if we are allowing non-party stakeholders to vote, then I think that would raise questions for other groups like associations that have members that aren't parties.
Yeah. Jerome asked an interesting question. My recollection was that parties voted, and not just somebody that just showed up, to a couple of meetings, but I could be wrong.
I think these protocols evolved from a place where it was stakeholders to parties. And for trade associations that, you know, it wasn't necessarily that, for example, CCTA at the time when individuals had a voice, they'd exercise that individual voice, individual members. But, you know, sounds like you've set a path forward to putting that to bed.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can address it as parties. I don't know how quickly, but I think we can address it. I'd like to think we can address everything relatively quickly, but like some things do take time, and we have to like grind it out. And we'll take the time we need, I assume, to make sure that before we get started, that we're all on the same page and we all agree to the same guidelines and guardrails for the meetings and the protocols. So that will be an important part of the first set of technical meetings. Okay, so see, we're at 10:10. We've been going for just about an hour. I would suggest that we take a 5-minute break and bio break, refreshment break, snack break, whatever break, and everybody can just relax for a few minutes, and we'll come back right about 10:15, and I'll open my camera and my microphone back up, and we'll get the ball rolling at 10:15 on item G and technical workshops. And as fast as we're going, I believe that we may get done with this at or before lunchtime. So with that, let's take a quick break, and I'll see you in 5 minutes. Oh, fantastic. You love AI. I know I do. I just wish I knew how to use it better. Okay, folks, for those of you that are back and ready, we'll dive into agenda item G, and we'll meander into it slowly for those just getting back from their break. I wanted to talk about today, and so we could put something into this report to the commission. I think we sort of touched on it earlier, on how if any party has any strong thoughts and beliefs or objections to having hybrid meetings, which is a combination of in-person and virtual availability. As I mentioned, I prefer in-person meetings. I can tell you from some personal experience that I work on many international, national standards committees and different bodies with IEEE and NFPA and ASTM and others. And during the COVID years, 2020 and 2021, we deferred some of our meetings and some of our publications of standards because, one, we weren't well versed in virtual meetings, and we were also kind of scrambling right how to get that done virtually. And as we became a little bit more adept at some virtual meetings, some of my committees that I work on held to the belief, and I think it was the correct assumption, that the best outcome for certain technical matters was to meet in person. So the National Electrical Safety Code subcommittees, for example, decided to delay the publication of the 2022 National Electrical Safety Code until all the subcommittees could meet in person. And then because we thought the product would be better, the outcome would be better. And so that's why there's a 2023 edition instead of a 2022 edition. I think ultimately, in those forums, that was the right decision. That said, I don't know if the commission and commission staff and others are amenable to in-person meetings. At the moment, I don't see any reason not to do it. So, and I can tell you we've done it in the past with some success. It is, I think, in some respects, much easier to get into technical items with whiteboards and other means of discussions, and sometimes having sidebar discussions that you can have in-person meetings. It's very difficult to have in virtual only meetings. So the first item that I want to bring up is, does anybody have any strong objection to having a combination in-person virtual meeting, or do you have a strong feeling that it should just be in person or just be virtual? Or should we just have you do it in comments? Like if nobody has a strong opinion on it either way, I think for Edison, I think we're fine with having a hybrid approach. I think Edison would be more than willing to host workshops, in-person technical workshops that have a hybrid feature, a virtual feature. We certainly have rooms that are large enough in our Pomona facility to host such meetings. I don't want to put San Diego and PG&E on the spot, although I probably am a little bit. But in past meetings, not necessarily GO95 rulemaking proceedings, we have met in rooms that had the ability to have a virtual option along with in-person meetings. And we've done it just recently. So my general sense is that the three largest IOUs are certainly capable of hosting in-person meetings with a virtual option, which I call hybrid. So we're capable of doing it. Certainly have the capability. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? If not, I'll just move on.
I did see Fadi had his hand up, but I don't. He lowered it, so I don't know if you still have a comment, Fadi.
No, I agree with Sam. I think it's very important to have in-person meeting to discuss those rules. It's very hard to discuss them through hybrid, but we should have a hybrid option for those who are not able to attend.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I see Randy has his hand up.
Yes, I just will weigh in that we discussed it here at PG&E, and we agree, Sam, that in-person gives you the best result. That's not always possible, so we would definitely support a hybrid approach, in-person and virtual.
Okay.
And I see Josh has his hand up as well.
Sorry, I was on mute. I think AT&T also supports a hybrid approach, really just in case we need to bring technical experts to weigh in, but we'll also be attending in person.
Thank you. And Josh, before I let you go, is the AT&T building on Watt Avenue have any suitability for in-person and virtual, or is that no longer an option?
We can. I'm sure we can find a building. I don't know if it'll be at Sacramento or on Watt Avenue, but if you need help, we may be able to provide something. I'm sure.
Okay. I mean, everybody likes to go to Sacramento in the spring, so
that's right.
If we can pry them away from San Diego. Everybody likes to go to San Diego in the spring too.
That's right.
So
I support San Diego as well.
Okay. Yeah, good choice. Good choice there. And by the way, we just did a meeting. We did a workshop, a couple of days of workshops in San Ramon, and at the meeting center in San Ramon, PG&E was hosting it for a different proceeding. And we used a device that does a 360 camera, 360 degree view camera. And when you put a couple of them in the room or one in the room, it also provides both video and audio. And it was amazing. I forget the name of the device. It's like a little circle, looks like almost like a snow globe. And you can sit it on top of, an object. and it gets a good panorama of the room, and it does a pretty good job of microphone pickup. So even if you don't have a room with speakers and microphones in the ceilings and around, those devices are fantastic.
I think they call it the owl, is what I've heard. I forget who makes
The
it.
owl.
Yeah,
That's right.
As a slang term for it, or the term.
Yeah. We've used those in other meetings. I forgot the name of it. Thank you. But I've seen them be very effective in both large and small rooms. So certainly technical capability is there. You do have to have some pretty good Wi-Fi, and you do have to have somebody that can speak up. I've never had that problem personally about projecting voice, but I think that sounds to me like a way to go. Certainly, there doesn't appear to be any objection for the folks on this call.
Yeah, this is Jerome. I'll echo support as well, particularly since it allows for our subject matter experts to attend where they're not necessarily in the area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Because we do sometimes have experts that are world travelers, and I don't know if one of my favorite industry experts would be able to phone in from his cruise ship as he and his wife are cruising the Mediterranean or across the Atlantic or wherever they're at. But certainly having the ability to do like the phone a friend option, like they may not be attending the meeting, but they may be able to attend for an hour or two and weigh in on a certain topic. We've used that effectively in the past where people cannot get to a certain point in a certain day, but can be available. So I think we have general consensus around the parties that have spoken up that a hybrid option seems to be amenable. They seem to be amenable to that. As far as facilitation and note taking, this goes a little.
Sam.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Henry?
I did see Randy still has his hand up. I don't know if that is intentional or not, but I wanted to make sure we got to him before we moved on to facilitation.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. It's not intentional. Let me lower it down. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Sam. Go on.
Yeah, sure. No, that's fine. Which also kind of like swerves into the issue of like the hybrid meeting can be a little bit more challenging if it goes to my next point of the fact that when you have facilitation and note takers, it usually a hybrid option does generally take extra facilitation assistance. It can be difficult, speaking from personal experience, for one person to run an in-person meeting and also keep track of everything that's happening on the computer side of it. So, hybrid meetings do take a little bit more effort. It usually requires a little bit, two people, or at least some assistance with facilitation. Note-taking, I don't remember ever using a hybrid option in a commission proceeding where we recorded. It felt to me like we weren't trying to create that precise of a record. So the note-taking was generally a little higher level and not like a court reporter type of situation. So I only mention this because in past workshops, having recordings can sometimes have a chilling effect on open discussions, whereas sometimes opinions need to be expressed. Sometimes, stories need to be told. Sometimes like things just need to be said that are probably better not recorded. Or, if they do need to be said, but people don't want to talk about it because they are on, quote unquote, on the record. So I guess we can decide that in the first meetings, but just as a point of reference, I don't recall ever being in a workshop that we use the recording method from either Teams or WebEx or any of the other platforms as a note-taking device. We typically did note-taking at the meeting and not a recording. So we don't have to decide that today, but I just wanted to mention about how that would work. As far as facilitation goes, I think that's something else parties should be considering making comments on. Now, in the past, GO95 rulemakings, we've done a variety of facilitation. The technical work groups have been self-facilitated. The technical folks have chosen, selected a person or persons, because sometimes there are multiple technical work groups working on change proposals in parallel. But very often it's just one technical work group and they select their own facilitator. So they self-facilitate the technical folks. And that facilitator will then bring back to the attorneys and regulatory folks in a meeting that occurs, that has occurred, like the next day or 2 days later. Like very often the technical folks will work for 2 days, and then we'll have one legal regulatory day so that the folks from the company and management can review the work product. And if a vote needs to be taken, it's taken at that meeting. And the lawyers and the regulatory people and process and management people have a chance to ask their questions and help frame a company position. And those meetings might start out with some facilitation by the same person that does the technical meetings, but it doesn't have to. That could be a different facilitation or facilitator. And in other proceedings, I can think of one in particular, or one part of a proceeding. We actually had assigned ALJs run the meetings where we took the votes. The official votes were taken through facilitation with an ALJ, and not, I don't think the assigned ALJ, but they were ALJ annuitants. They had retired and were coming back and working part-time, and they facilitated the voting meeting, which was pretty much just a formality since the parties had met the day before and voting positions were pretty well established. But officially, they were that meeting was facilitated by somebody from the commission. So I say all that to mention to parties that in their comments to this report, the parties can decide for themselves how they want to do it, but the commission may want to have the Safety Policy Division facilitate. They might want to have the Safety Enforcement Division facilitate, be in charge of the technical and general voting meetings. They may want to have SED or SPD or another division that I'm not thinking of. I'm not trying to insult any other division, but they might want to have somebody from the commission co-facilitate with representation from the parties. So all those things are certainly options. All those things have certainly been done. So parties may want to weigh in comments to the workshop report on that as well. I don't know if we need to spend much time talking about it. Those of you that have been doing this have seen all the variables. So Henry, do you have any questions about facilitation and that sort of thing for work groups or meetings? I know this might be a little bit, you might be, dunked into the deep part of the tank here. So do you have any questions about that or any thoughts on that?
No, but I'm always interested in hearing what any of the parties have to say, and if not today, in the comments. It's always nice to have different perspectives. So, thank you.
Okay, so I'll open the floor. Does anybody have any thoughts on facilitation? I see a comment in chat from Garland Johnston, and it looks like it was about the hybrid. I just took down one of my documents so I could see more of my screen. So if there's no, I'll give everybody a chance, but if there's no discussion on facilitation and note taking, then we'll move on to the number of workshops. I put on their future dates, but honestly, I don't know that today, as we sit here, we can. A day or so ago. Okay. So since we appear to be focused strictly on LRFD, both the proposals that are in queue, developed by the Rules Committee, those two sets, and I think we've established that there are probably some fine-tuning to do on some proposals. Yeah, sure.
I think it might have cut out for some of us during the last part on the future dates and number of workshops. Do you mind if just briefly repeating yourself there?
Oh, no problem. Sorry about that. So I'm thinking if there's no other comments or concerns about facilitation and note-taking, nothing left on that one. From a number of workshop perspective, if we're focused solely on the LRFD proposals that we have in hand today, with the idea that there will be some work to do, technical work, and some other verbiage and perhaps other words to work on and other rules that were not addressed succinctly. I think from Edison's perspective, and I'm only speaking for myself, not Edison, I could foresee at least 4 sets of 2-day technical workshops with a possibility of a 5th set of 2-day workshops to get through the material. And I wouldn't want to lead the group down a rabbit hole where we don't have enough time. But in the past, what we've done is we've proposed a calendar of events in comments where we said, like, well, here's some dates, and every other week or every 3rd week we would meet for 2 days technically, and then we would set aside a 3rd day or a half a day on the 2nd day to meet and review from a regulatory, legal, management perspective. So they could be 2-day workshops, they could be 2.5-day workshops or 3-day workshops to get through the material. But I think our experience has proven that we start out pretty well, but then we find at the end of the process, we're in a bit of a scramble and something gets hung up. And so when we're going to have one last workshop to do a final vote, we find out that we can't do it and we need another set of workshops. So my sense is that even if if any party proposes in comments a calendar of events, like let's say we started workshops in, let's just say May, and avoiding holidays and, those sorts of things, looking through May and June and possibly into mid-July after the 4th of July, I think it's foreseeable that we could have 4 or 5 sets of 2-day workshops on a calendar with an option for, if necessary, additional meetings if the work grinds or slows for some unforeseen reason. But my sense is if we give ourselves 5 workshops, we'll take 5 workshops. And if we give ourselves 4 workshops, then we'll try to do it in 4. We can ask for a 5th. So I'm open to suggestions, but I just bring it up as a topic so that if parties want to comment or want to say something here about how they see it, 2 consecutive days, and have the legal and management regulatory review the second half of the 2nd day. And that way we're not tying up 3 days of 3 work days. I'm certainly open to that. 3 days might be a stretch. So those of you with experience and that maybe haven't thought about it, if you'd like to weigh in on that on this call, you're certainly welcome to do so. I wanted to tee that up to see what if there was some new or improved thinking on that.
I see Fadi has his hand up.
Okay, sure. Hi, Fadi.
Yeah. Hi, Sam. Are the technical workshops designed to discuss only the rules that are in the petition, or all the rules that will be affected by LRFD?
I think it's both. I think it's the latter. We would start with the rules that were proposed, and if when we swerve into other rules that need to be addressed, like, yes, we would have to, I think we would want to be as comprehensive as we could.
Okay, so during those technical workshops, we will have to actually identify every rule in GEO-95 that will be affected and that will need to be modified if the commission decided to adopt LRFD, correct?
Yes, yes. I think since we have the topic narrowed to LRFD, I believe that yes, if there are rules that have not yet been addressed, or succinctly or correctly, that they would have to be brought up in technical workshops. Yes. Does that make you think that we would need more than 10 days to get through them, like two days at a time over the course of 5 weeks? Do you think we might need more time than that?
Well, I mean, SED and you guys, we met for 18 months and we still have some disputes. So I think
that's true, but we were still kind of like sounding out, other things, right? But I could also see us as parties suggesting that, that we preliminarily start with 5, and then if more time is needed, that we can ask for it, and we can like do a sanity check at week 4. And if the parties feel like more time is needed, and there's, like we can get our arms around how much work there is left to do, we could certainly approach the ALJ and commissioner and say we need more time. I mean, we've done that before, as you may recall. So I wouldn't think that if parties said like we should start out with 5 with a possibility of needing more, I don't see any harm in that approach. It's not very definitive, but I agree with you. It could take more than 10 days to do it, especially to get a vote out, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like when you suggested 4-ish workshops of 2 days, is that kind of just your experience feeling it out, Sam, or like in your mind, do you have like workshop number 1? We're talking, do you have it kind of like thought up in your head of workshop number 1? We're talking Rule 44. Workshop number 2, we're talking Rule 48. Workshop number 3, that's Rule 12, or however. Or is that just kind of you've done this enough times where you feel like I feel like this is how long it'll take?
I think the first workshop will probably spend most of the first day getting through the protocols and the agendas and getting organized to do the work. I mean, we might do it in half a day, but my guess is the first day we'd have all the parties there, the lawyers, the regulatory folks, management folks, whoever, and the technical folks, and we would get through the business of running the workshops and who's in charge and how it's going to get done, et cetera, and getting parties introduced to each other and getting some momentum to get going. The second day would probably just be purely technical. There wouldn't be anything that comes out that needs to be voted on. So the first day would probably be for everybody. The second day of that workshop, that first workshop meeting could be technical. In fact, we could do a 3-day and have the first day dedicated to like organizing, the second 2 days just so that the attorneys and management people could go home if they wanted to, and the second 2 days just for the technical people. And in that meeting, the technical people, I think, would also do a little bit more fine tuning on, okay, where are we going to start, and map out a course of like, shall we just go in numerical order, if that makes sense to everybody, and get our work organized around that. So I could see 2 days, the first meeting being 3, and then meetings after that being a day and a half for technical and half a day for management if it's needed. And with a break in between, a week or 2 between workshops, depending on how enthusiastic parties were about it. I don't think we need to do it every week. Usually people have real jobs and real responsibilities and things to do besides go to workshops. So if we did it every other week or every third week, I think we could come up with a calendar, maybe in advance of like what we're going to do, but the content and order of rules might depend on the technical people the first day. But yes, I do think we would start with Rule 44, and then I think we would work through Section 4, and then I think we would work through other sections of GO 95 that had terms of art that needed to be addressed. So I think it would be Section 4 first, starting with Rule 44. And I think that would probably take a good 4 weeks to do, a 2-day and day and a half workshops for the technical people. At a very minimum, I think it would take 4. But I think now that I'm sitting here thinking and thinking about what Fadi has said about how long we took on the meet and confer process, but we were only meeting once a month there for like half a day. I could foresee 5 at the outset being like the first. Let's go for 5, and if we need more, then we'll ask.
Okay, thank you. I see Jerome has his hand up.
We have other folks on the call that have been through this with me. They might see it. This is more controversial, less controversial than other changes to GO 95 we worked on. Jerome, do you have something?
Well, sure. Jerome Candelaria, Cal Broadband. My sense of the process would be instead of it being a staircase or steps where decisions are made after each specific section of workshops, technical or otherwise, that work would be done. And when it comes to actual consensus decisions, votes, it would only be after we were allowed to collectively come back together, bring back in the lawyers and the regulatory folks. I think that's baked into what you're suggesting, but I just wanted to make clear that that's your understanding of how things will work.
It is. And I'll tell you something, Jerome. There is another viewpoint on this that I've been sort of kicking around, and I haven't talked about internally in my company or with the other IOUs about. But another approach that could be equally effective and perhaps less time intrusive for the lawyers and the regulatory folks and the management folks would be to let the technical team, the technical work groups, work through all of the GO 95 proposed rule changes and get to a point of here's the things we have consensus on, here are the things we don't have consensus on, and perhaps even create alternative proposed rule changes. Let's say there's a certain rule that parties don't agree on, and there's like 2 or 3 different alternatives. And we've seen that in the fire safety proceeding many times. An approach could be, instead of having the attorneys and regulatory and management people in throughout the process, to let the technical people go through all of the changes so that we can see holistically what has been agreed upon, what has not been agreed upon, so that if we meet from a legal regulatory management perspective towards the end of that process, it really wouldn't matter how we got there. That would just be the way the technical groups finished their work product and did their work. And then the presentation to staff, if the commissioner wanted to come in, ALJ wanted to come in, we were explaining it prior to the vote. We could vote sort of on the whole end-to-end review of how the LRFD rules impacted other parts of GO 95, and you would see a more complete picture instead of a piece at a time, like these rules, these rules, these rules, and these rules. We could see the whole thing end to end, so that all the companies' indication of what the outcome is going to be. All the parties would see, like, well, we've tugged on all the strings, and here's where we think the impacts of the different rules, and we think we have the verbiage right. We think that we can operationalize it. We think that it can be, run by the commission. We think it can be enforced by the staff. We think it would be interpreted, Everybody understands like end to end now what LRFD means inside of Geo 95. Maybe an alternative approach is just do the technical work and then come back for, 2 or 3 days, or maybe a couple of, management meetings, regulatory meetings, take a preliminary vote, give ourselves, a couple of weeks to like hammer it out in our companies and make sure that we're all, that we all voted correctly, and then come back for a final vote and then submit it in the workshop report. That is a way that we could do it. Do the legal and regulatory part at the end.
That somewhat, oh, sorry, may I speak?
Sure.
It strikes me as a 2 steps forward, maybe 1 step back approach versus slow single steps. Having guidance from legal and regulatory would at least keep things tuned as we progress. But rather than have the technical folks weigh in and then it all be reeled back. But I'll look for more internal guidance on that issue too. And it sounds like we have the luxury of maybe addressing this in our first meeting.
Yeah, and you're right. And the downside to that approach is that if companies, the attorneys and regulatory and management people say like this is not doable, this is like not acceptable, because the technical people don't often make the decisions that run the companies, and there's other perspectives besides the technical side. Something can be technically correct but not useful. That would be problematic at the end if the company said like this needs to get fixed, and then you have to bring the technical people back in to try to fix it. Whereas if you just do self-corrections along the way, then you get a better work product and everybody has been on the journey together throughout. So I personally like the idea of having legal regulatory meetings after the technical meetings as a touchstone to make sure that everybody's still like not just technically correct, but legally, regulatory, like operationally correct as we go through the process. I think you get to the same place, but it would probably be less onerous to go through the method we've been using, which is the regulatory legal touch point throughout the process. I personally prefer that approach, but I just want to throw out there are other ways to do it. I see Fadi on my screen. I don't want to put him on the spot too much than I ordinarily do. But Fadi, you've been through these too. Do you have, if you're listening, do you have a sense of whether or not SED would prefer having legal and regulatory touch points along the technical process? I don't see him coming off screen. Oh, there he is.
Well, I think if there's a way we can keep attorney out, it would be more productive workshops. But
well, I'm just talking about throughout, not in the technical meetings, but like we meet for a day and a half, and then like here's where we're at, and see if there's any feedback. Do you have any concern with that approach?
no, I don't.
Okay.
I also see Darian Johnston has their hand raised. So Darian, if you'd like to make a comment. And I'm not hearing you, Darian.
I was on mute. Apologize. Awesome. This is Darian Johnston on behalf of Q. And I just want to weigh in to say Q has a pretty small team working on this, and we're both attorneys and have different levels of experience and background. And for what it's worth, I've done what I can to give myself a background in LRFD, but also in my experience, I think it's important to make sure that everybody, irrespective of their background, has a clear understanding of what load and resistance factor design is. And I don't think we should pretend that everyone, even on this call, is an expert on that. And I think it might be really effective and helpful to start level setting by just a bare bones understanding of what is this design methodology, what are its principles, and what's the purpose of adopting this methodology in the context of GO 95. I think that's a really important place to start, just so as we work off, so that we're working off a clear foundation and that we're not drawing lines between who's really understanding from a technical perspective versus a legal or regulatory perspective, because we're all coming together at the end of the day to make a decision that's effective for the public, and making sure that all the interests are well balanced. So that's my perspective.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. That's a good perspective. We're not from an IOU perspective, we're not oblivious to the fact that not everybody has lots of attorneys, lots of like educated managers, lots of like a large engineering department and so forth, and that like different parties are going to come about, not only come at this in a different way, but there's going to be various levels of understanding. That is certainly where we would probably take the first day of standalone workshops, where we would bring all the parties together and talk about like where we're at, what we're doing, how we're doing it. If you're going to be on the call for the rest of the morning, we're going to have Andy Stewart come on in a few minutes, and he's going to give you a little bit of background on why and how we got there, along with sort of a high-level description of how we developed the strength and loading factors for GO 95. And I think that might help you a little bit, but it certainly isn't the deep dive that you're asking about. So yes, the initial workshops are going to have to be a little bit educational. We certainly want everybody to go on the journey together. We don't want to leave anybody behind. I can't promise you that as an attorney you will understand it as well as the engineers that are going to be involved. But certainly there needs to be an understanding enough of the not just the technical issue, but of the application and the operation and the enforcement side of it. All these things roll together in our world, and I think it needs to be clearly understood what the outcome is. I think that's our goal. The Rules Committee is a technical committee. We don't concern ourselves ordinarily with the legal, regulatory, enforcement, management, and operation of rules, but we all work for companies that have those concerns in mind. So we don't address that. The committee itself does not address non-technical issues, which is one of the reasons why the committee doesn't have any formal standing. We're just an ad hoc conglomeration of communication and electric utilities, trade associations, and unions. But we meet only technical issues. So when we get into workshops, every member of the Rules Committee has to represent themselves. So even non-members, Q, for example, and others, we're not trying, there's no attempt and no reason to leave anybody behind. So if you or your coworker are coming to a meeting, we would strive out of the chute to make sure that there is level setting, to make sure everybody understands what we're doing, why we're doing it, and the outcomes, depending on how we do the workshops. Apparently there would be touch points along the way. That is the goal, for everybody to get there at the same time. So I appreciate that. I really do. On the matter of on this matter of number of workshops and future dates, I think the IOUs will go back and probably do some quick math on this, but just from my experience, my sense is we're going to need at least 5 2-day or day and a half technical workshops. If we do a legal regulatory touch point at every meeting, after every day and a half, or every other day and a half, just to make sure the attorneys and regulatory and management people are caught up, that's certainly possible. In past proceedings, we've also had special working groups, not necessarily that have spun off from the technical work groups, that have also worked between workshops. on specialty issues. So a small team might be working on something, or 2 or 3 small teams might be working on something to bring back to the larger technical group, so that it can be addressed in the technical workshops. So my instinct is we're going to need at least 5 and probably 6 technical meetings. And if we integrate regulatory management, legal touch points in there, maybe half of those will need that touch point as well throughout the process. Future dates, I don't think we can get into that right now. I don't think we're ready for that. I think when I wrote this agenda back in late November, early December, I thought that I might have a calendar of events to propose in this meeting, but I decided not to put that out there until maybe in comments, or maybe if the commission had some questions about it, that the IOUs or just Edison or whoever we work with could put out a proposed set of future dates for workshops based on what our conversations today were. By the way, if we want to cycle back to this, we can. If you're thinking and talking and chatting with somebody in your company about it, we can cycle back to it. But I wanted to move on to notices on the PUC on the calendar. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, this is Jerome. I understand we're deferring some of the calendar issues. I did want to flag that Cal Broadband in its comments expressed concern about the truncated nature of when the workshop report would be generated within 10 days.
This workshop report?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I know you're going to get to that. I mean, we'll talk about the workshop. I don't know if we'll talk about the timing, but just bear in mind, typically we would get some sort of commission action since our comments were on a preliminary calendar. But we want to raise that issue when it's appropriate, that based on the complexity here and the number of parties, a little more time for a collaborative workshop report, we think would be in order.
Oh, okay. You mean coming out of this meeting?
That's well, coming out of the work after we're finished with the actual workshops, that workshop report. Now we only have 10 days there, I think.
Oh, well, okay. I read the commission's decision that the IOU-led workshop report was due in 10 days.
Yeah, okay, I understand your point, but even that one with more time for collaboration would be in order, unless we could talk about that on the first day.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I suspect that from a long range perspective, assuming technical workshops to vet LRFD along with like the management, legal, regulatory days interspersed in there. And by the way, we could need a lot more than 6 dates to get that done. I could foresee under certain circumstances it taking many more, maybe twice as many. But whatever the commission decides, it's certainly like with here's the first 6 with an option for 6 more, or 5 with the option for 4 more, whatever the commission wants to do with that. I do agree with you that in this type of proceeding, I think we would need at least 30 days or more to get a workshop report of all that work in front of the commission. Certainly, that I think I shared that view with you, Jerome. For this workshop report, I can tell you for this IOU-led workshop, the one we're doing today, I think I just envisioned that as pretty much just straight reporting that we went through the agenda. We obviously have a recording of it as a transcript. Unfortunately, I'm going to be way too prominent on it, but if that's just used as a backup, I just see straight reporting on who went through these topics, and we're pretty much we touched on them just to give parties the opportunity to speak on them here if they wanted to, but certainly just to make sure they had in mind that on comments to this report, they had the opportunity to tell the commission, well, on this topic, we like this, on this topic, we like that. So in this agenda, I was just trying to give everybody the opportunity to tee up all the topics they might want to tell the commission is important for future workshops.
I got it. I think the thing is, to me, the OIR was a little unclear when, they talked about IOU-led party workshop in the time frame, that 10 days there. But I understand that your interpretation, which I think we would support, is, that's separate from what you're going to generate from today's meeting.
Yeah. And like I think I have concurrence from the IOUs. I don't think this is just Stone Rock thinking out loud, that we just intend to do straight reporting on this workshop, and then the commission would make a decision on future workshops and how much time, how much effort, like where, when, how, and all those additional issues, like how much time we would have to get out a workshop report, et cetera. And you and I and many others on this call have worked under some different time frames, but in the fire safety proceeding, for example, you may recall, like, some of these workshop reports were like 300 plus pages, and they were not easy to get out. And we want to make sure everybody had a chance to make sure their position was represented. So it can take, and I'm getting to it down in subpart 4, number 3 down here, about like that sort of minutia. But I think for this workshop report, it's just going to be straight reporting on what we talked about today. But certainly appreciate you bringing it up, Jerome.
I see Darian has their hand up.
Hi, yes, this is Darian with Q again. That was really helpful, that back and forth in terms of what kind of we're looking for today in identifying potential topics that the commission should consider having future workshops on. And I know a number of parties, including Q, submitted comments in response to the OIR, identifying and kind of explaining what types of issues they thought might be covered. And I just want to reiterate that we think that Q thinks that there's lessons to be learned potentially from other jurisdictions that have adopted this methodology. And to the extent that there are folks that can come speak to that, talk about how maybe the outcomes that it's had on safety and reliability, or challenges they've had in implementation, staffing issues, training issues, the things that we've talked about. I think that would be very helpful, because as we know from SCE's filings, this is not a new design methodology. So there should theoretically be a lot of information out there to look at, and we hope that that's consolidated and streamlined. So folks, particularly again, folks who aren't coming from an engineering background, have a really clear sense of the facts that we're looking at, as we're making changes to GO 95 policy.
Sure. Well, appreciate that. I'm gonna touch, and is there anybody else? I'm just gonna want to move quickly to item number 4, Roman numeral 4, and then we're gonna stop, and I'm gonna queue up Andy. And even though I don't think we're gonna need 40 minutes, I just want to be cognizant of the fact that he has a hard stop right before noon. And we're just going to go down to I and the second bullet. We agreed earlier that we were not going to discuss formulas or comparisons between WSD and LRFD methodology. We weren't going to do that here, but we were going to discuss the development of the strength and loading factors for Rule 44. Just at this point, sort of as a teaser, I guess, for the technical workshops, and because SPD asked for it. So is there anything else on this topic? Number of workshops and future dates? Okay, hearing none. We'll move on.
Sorry,
yeah, sorry, I've got my hand up.
Ian, yeah.
Oh,
yeah, thank you.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Sorry, Ian, Public Advocate's Office. Just one quick clarification, I hope. How do you see these technical workshops relating to the scoping memo? Are you planning for them to come after or before or concurrent with?
I think the future scoping memo for this proceeding could be based solely on comments to this workshop report, but it could also be based on a pre-hearing conference that the commission holds, or a set of questions, like a supplemental questions submitted by the commission to parties to answer, so they can more narrowly refine their future vision of how technical workshops, the results, the workshop reports, et cetera, and the time that it takes to get done can be performed. So I don't know that I don't know that the comments on this meeting will have sufficient bulk or information to let the commission create a informed scoping memo for future workshops. I think it's going to be based on our comments to this, like anything we want to say about it, like how much time, et cetera, things that I've teed up here. And then other things that I didn't tee up that that's not in here that anybody wants to talk about. But if as it sounds like, to Commissioner Baker's point, that we are going to focus on LRFD, it helps narrow the scope of any other peripheral issues that somebody might have had in mind. So if we're going to focus on LRFD, now it comes down to how much time do we need and how do we want to do it, like hybrid meetings, et cetera. So if you or your, and I don't, you're with Q.
No, with public advocacy.
Okay, I just see. Oh, I'm not. You're not with Q. You're with
Public advocates.
Sorry. Oh, public advocates. So if public advocate says like they only need 2 meetings, you can say that. I don't think that's correct. But every party can weigh in on how many technical workshops they think need to be done to help the commission, move this downstream with a scoping memo.
Okay, so just to clarify, the implication there is that you anticipate the scoping memo to be before the technical workshops. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Ian, I'm not speaking on behalf of the commission here, but if you look at the original resolution that set this thing up, there's kind of this pre-meeting, then there's opportunities to comment on it, and then the scoping memo is the next scheduled thing on that initial set of tasks. So at least the original resolution doesn't have technical meetings before the scoping meeting.
Understood, but there was never been any. Well, okay, sorry, but in my naivety, there's never been any. I was expecting this to actually be one of the technical meetings. That's the issue. So I'm just trying to understand where we are in the process.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. This is not the technical meeting. This is just a preliminary thing to help us get started.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Very happy to discuss. Okay. So as far as the notices go, historically, these type of workshops have been noticed, and it's been noticed on the commission's calendar. And from that respect, I would expect that to continue, which is part of like the scoping memo. And I assume that would be in the scoping memo to say like, okay, public notice has to be provided. There's all kinds of ways to get that across, but in the past we've had notices placed in the commission's calendar just to make sure that everybody sees it and it's not just a closed. The only people that attend are the only people that know. So I assume that will continue. I probably didn't even need to put that on this agenda, but I think some of this is just brainstorming by myself when I was putting together the agenda. So let me switch gears, as I said, to be mindful of Andy Stewart's time. Andy, are you still on the call?
I am here.
I can't see everybody. Oh, very good. Sounds like the audio is working, and it sounds like, and I assume your video will be working. And so, Jacob, I assume you're still monitoring. I'm going to stop sharing, although I think I do have the deck. Andy, if you want me to share and then just...
I've got it, Sam, and I've got it loaded up. I don't think it will be a big deal for me to share it. I will try that right now.
Okay.
And assuming, let's see. Are you able to see?
I can see it.
You can or can't?
I can.
Can. Okay.
I can see it as well.
Well, very good. So I will go ahead and proceed then. And my charge, as I understand it, based on the discussion earlier, is to walk through a presentation that provides a sense for how we came up with the load and resistance factors that are incorporated in the proposal. I want to mention to you, if you're looking for another venue to meet when we get to the workshops, you can always come to Fort Collins. The low temperature today was -1. So if you're, yeah, we were all shocked. I was really surprised when I woke up this morning. It was that cold. But anyway, it's great to be with you, and I'm looking forward to walking you through this presentation. So just as to kind of level set for the conversation, the current approach in Section 4, design approach, if you will, that is included in Section 4 of GO 95 is what is known as allowable strength design. There are other terms of art that you will hear where it is referred to as working stress design or also allowable stress design. And what we're proposing to move to is what is known as load and resistance factor design, or LRFD. One of the things that you'll hear me repeat several times throughout this presentation, there's only 7 slides in this presentation, is that in the context of our discussion, the term resistance in that LRFD design format is equivalent to strength. Okay, so you can think of those terms synonymously. The other thing I wanted to point out as we move through this presentation is that the genesis of this proposal really dates back to discussions that began almost 15 years ago with a desire to just modernize Section 4 of GO 95 so it better aligns with what engineering students today are exposed to in their curriculum, and so that it also aligns more with other codes and standards in the format incorporated in those codes and standards used elsewhere in the industry. For example, the National Electrical Safety Code moved to an LRFD format several years ago. So this would also help us to have, in California, kind of points of reference, if you will. And to, I think it was Darian's point, people can, from the NESC, can speak to the benefits that have been derived from this shift. So with that, hopefully, let's move to this next slide. And wanted to do a little bit deeper dive in to look at really how is ASD, allowable strength design, applied, and then look at how LRFD is applied. So in allowable strength design, you start with strength. Let's say the strength of a component is 10 pounds, and you have some load effects. And let's say the load effects, they're 2 pounds. Well, in ASD, you're going to take the ratio of the strength to those load effects, and you're going to attempt to ensure a level of safety by ensuring that a minimum safety factor is exceeded. So in that example I just gave, dividing 10 by 2, you would have a value of 5. Now there would be some codified, let's say, safety factor that you would compare that to. If it was greater than that codified safety factor, then you're good to go. If not, then you would have to adjust the strength or somehow figure out how to reduce the loads accordingly. So now in that regard, safety factors are always greater than or equal to a quantity of 1.0. Now, when we move to LRFD, we separate the quantities and we add actually like one more variable to the way the math works out. in LRFD, we take the load effects and we multiply them by let's call it a magnification factor, something that's going to increase the effects of the loads to help ensure safety and reliability. So in that context, load factors, as you'll see in the proposal, are always greater than or equal to 1. On the other side of the equation, when you look at the strengths of materials, for the same purpose of preserving or ensuring safety and reliability, you're going to take the strengths and you're going to multiply them by strength factors, all of which are less than or equal to 1. Okay, I'm just going to pause there and see if there's any questions about that before we kind of jump into more of the math. Okay, so
I see. Sorry, I see Fadi has his hand up.
Yeah, hi Wendy. Just a quick question for you, because you mentioned that the NESC has moved toward LRFD also. Am I correct when I say that that only applies to structure or poles that are 30 feet or less, and the NESC still use safety factor for something above it?
No, I think, Fadi, what you're thinking of is the extreme wind loads. The extreme wind loads in the NESC only apply to structures that are 60 feet or 60 feet or more out of the ground.
Okay. So what you're saying is NESC has moved toward LRFD for all kind of structure of poles, regardless of the length.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So our thought as the rule committee was that we would take kind of a crawl, walk, run approach to the implementation of LRFD, because there's a lot of benefits purely associated with the framework of LRFD that won't be realized initially, but could serve the industry for years to come, as there are refinements in materials, refinements in knowledge about loads, and so forth and so on. So our premise for the proposal is that in this first step of the implementation of the framework, if you will, is that by using load and resistance factors, again, aka strength factors, we would yield the same design results as applying the minimum safety factors that are currently in GEO95. So some will think, well, why would we do this? Because we're going to get the same results. Well, the point is we're creating a modern framework that then sets the stage, again, for years to come for potential improvements that would lend themselves to enhancing safety and reliability. And I'll try to illustrate one of those as we move through this, so that this presentation kind of would stand on its own without anyone having to look up anything in GEO95. Just as a point of reference, on this next slide, we've included a screen capture of Table 4, the minimum safety factors currently incorporated in GEO95. I'm going to pause there for a minute so folks can kind of absorb what those factors are for the grades A, B, and C construction. And grade A would be considered, let's say, the most reliable construction, and grade C, let's say, the least reliable construction. So if you scroll down, if you can see my cursor, and you look at wood, you see that reflected in the safety factors, in this case for wood poles. 4 for grade A, 3 for grade B, 2 for grade C. Okay? Now, as I move to the next slide, what you're going to see is a table that looks very much like Table 4. It's going to be labeled Table 4.2. This is part of the proposal. And what you'll see, though, now is instead of safety factors in the table, we have tabulated strength factors. And you'll notice that instead of going back to the earlier equation, instead of these values being greater than equal to 1, they are less than or equal to 1 because of how we'll apply them. Okay, so I'll pause there. And again, I mean, the table format and look is a little different, but the contents in terms of the line elements are all the same, but you can see now the strength factors are all less than 1 because of the way we're going to apply them. Now, the addition that comes in with the LRFD proposal, instead of just having one table with safety factors, we're proposing that there would also be a table with minimum load factors. So you'll notice too the terms, the minimum load factors, because we're using those as magnifiers, and maximum strength factors because we're using those to reduce the strengths, and in combination, that promotes the safety and reliability. Now, in our current proposal, you'll notice that with integrative construction, all of the proposed load factors are the same. So 1.5 for vertical loads, wind loads, wire tension loads. For grade B, 1.25 for vertical loads, wind loads, and wire tension loads. Today, there is no distinction in the safety factors for those 3 different loading components. In our proposal, we're choosing to break these out to set the stage for potential future refinements in Section 4. Well, why do I say that? Well, for example, from my perspective, it doesn't make sense that we would use the same load factors for vertical loads and wire tensions as we would for wind loads. Well, why do I say that? Well, the vertical loads, except in the mountains of California, are the weights of the components, the weight of the poles, the weight of the wires, the weight of the transformers. We generally know those loads quite well. Wire tensions, we know those loads quite well. Wind loads, much more highly variable. So thinking about 10 years down the line, if there's an opportunity to improve these factors, why would I want to use the same multiplier on vertical loads as wind loads? So we're not proposing any changes there now, but there can be future refinements that will enhance safety and reliability by accounting for some of those things that I just mentioned. All right, let's take another look at this and dig a little more deeply into the math. So, in allowable strength design, previously mentioned that we would take the ratio of the strength of the material or the component we're designing for or with, divided by the load effects. That might be the effects of the wind loads, that might be the effects of the wire tension, that might be the effects of the vertical loads. And we're ensuring that that ratio is greater than or equal to the minimum safety factors in the current table 4. In load and resistance factor design, we take the load effects, we multiply them by those magnification factors, and we ensure that the combination is less than or equal to the strength times the strength factor. Now, you can remember from your days in school where you looked at equations and you could rearrange the terms. So if we rearrange the terms on this equation and we bring the strength over to the left-hand side of the equation and the load factor to the right-hand side of the equation, we now have strength divided by load effects must be greater than or equal to the load factor divided by the strength factor, which looks a lot like the ratio for allowable strength design. So what does that do for me? Well, the basis for our current proposal was to use that to go ahead and calculate the equivalent factors. So for the current proposal, the effective minimum safety factor in table 4 is equal to the load factor in table 4.1 divided by the strength factor in table 4.2. Okay, I'll pause there to see if everybody's tracking thus far.
I don't see any hands up, so I think you can continue. I know I have a couple questions, but I want to save them for the end. Thank you. But I'm tracking on what you've talked about so far.
Okay. So we needed a starting point in terms of how are we going to divide up the safety factors to provide for this equivalency. So we looked at documents like the National Electrical Safety Code, other codes, how they handle the load factors, and we selected these load factors to reflect what we thought was a logical starting point. 1.5 load factors for grade A construction, 1.25 for grade B, and 1.25 for grade C. Once we have that information, then the strength factors are actually derived using that information. So for each minimum safety factor in table 4, we took the strength factor, the strength factor was determined by taking those load factors from table 4.1 and dividing by the corresponding minimum safety factor. The other thing I was going to point out here, sorry, I got ahead of myself. When I go back to this table up here, another plus to LRFD is I think it's a bit more intuitive when it comes to the handling of loads versus material strengths. For example, right now you kind of lose a little bit of physical feel when you're applying a factor of safety of 4 to wood poles and another safety factor of 4 to steel poles, whereas when you break it into load factors and strength factors, it kind of makes sense that if I have a wind load blowing on a steel pole, that wind load doesn't know it's blowing on a steel pole or a fiberglass pole or a wood pole. The load factor being the same across all materials and being consistent makes sense. Whereas the resistance factor should reflect the variability of the material that's used on the strength side of the equation. All right, let's jump into, this is actually the last slide, look at some examples to demonstrate how we end up with the load and strength factors providing the same design results as we're getting today with the minimum safety factor. So if I now go to the proposed tables and I select a few of the load and strength factors and calculate the ratios, let's just walk through this for a few examples. So let's take guys and let's look at grade A. So for grade A guys, I have a strength factor of 0.75. If I take the load factor of 1.5, divide it by 0.75, I get a value of 2. Now let's try that again. Let's look at wood poles. In grade A construction, I come down to my, I got my load factor of 1.5, come down to where I find wood poles, and I have a strength factor of 0.375. 1.5 divided by 0.375 equals 4. And let's do one more. Let's look at a grade B example for wood poles. If I take my load factor, in this case 1.25, I'm going to go to my table here, table 4.2, look for my strength factor, 0.415. I take that ratio, it calculates out to 3. And lo and behold, if I look at the same quantities in table 4, the minimum safety factors, I'm getting the same results. So it is equivalent in terms of the ratio of the load and strength factors to the minimum safety factors currently in GEO95. So I'll pause there. That's all I had to present to try and explain how we came up with the load and strength factors and how, at least out of the gates, the designs would be equivalent.
I see Randy.
Are you back with it?
Me?
Andy, are you back
I'm
with
here.
us?
I was just pausing.
Okay, yeah.
I'm
you cut out
here.
for just a second. Okay.
Okay.
And I see Randy has his hand up.
Yeah, hi, Andy. Just for additional background, I mean, you mentioned NESC went to LRFD some years ago. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, did they adopt LRFD in the 2012 NESC? And they allowed, they left the ASD methodology in there until 2017. So, I mean, this isn't that new, is it?
That's correct.
All right. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, in terms of engineering, it's not. And LRFD is not new, but in terms of the NESC, it's relatively new. Yeah.
Actually, it was several code cycles back. Randy, you mentioned 2012. I think it was actually 2007. Prior to that, you had an option of using either one, and then they sunsetted it. So, without looking, I think it was 2007 where you had to start using it. But it was several code cycles ago. It wasn't several years ago. It was several code cycles ago, more like 20 years.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, I actually happen to have the 2007 version on my desk. And in 2007, it was still an option, but it was the secondary method, not the primary method. Primary method was LRFD.
Right.
I don't see any other.
Thank you, Andy.
You bet.
I don't see any other hands up, so I'm going to ask my questions if that's all right. So, in other codes that I've seen when they've transitioned to LRFD, or I guess what I'm used to when thinking about LRFD, I'm used to thinking about beta factors. I'm used to thinking about like first moment, second moment. I'm used to thinking about like American National Standard A58 and all of the work from his name is escaping me at this moment, but Cornell and all of those guys back in the day. And so, do you have like any beta factors or anything like that calculated for this at this time?
So, Henry, you're speaking my love language there. So, in terms of getting to that, to me, that's directionally where we want to head with GO95 once we get the framework in place. But the beta factors would not. Beta, for those that are not familiar with that, beta is a simplified method to quantify probability of failure. And so you use numbers like 0 to 5 would be the beta factors, but they equate to probabilities of failure from 1 to many, many, many zeros with decimal places. So this proposal, Henry, to your question, does not change the beta factors because we are going to end up with equivalent designs. So, I mean, you get the same poll today as you get using this framework, but where the opportunity exists to enhance GO95 once this framework is in place, as we have better, let's say, wind load data in some part of California, that data can be enhanced to modify the effective beta values that you'd see out of the lines.
Cool. And then does that, so the 1.5 that was chosen, it wasn't really chosen. I understand that in order to have a beta factor, you need you need to have computed your load factor and also your potential strength factor. But the beta factor that you chose at 1.5, that was a number that was kind of picked because it was a number that the NESC kind of proposed. It's not really, it wasn't necessarily set up with a targeted reliability in mind.
That is, you nailed it. You absolutely correct. That is absolutely correct.
Okay.
That's where once the framework is in place, again, this provides the opportunity to begin working on some of those kinds of issues.
Another question that I had was when I've seen this done in the past, oftentimes the load factors remain constant regardless of like, let's call it like grade of construction. And the thing that varies is your, what they call like an importance factor. The idea, I believe, is that your variability of your loads is the same no matter what, but you can change, we could call it a grade factor based on your targeted reliability at each, whether it's grade A, grade B, or grade C. Did you consider that approach when you were putting this together, or is there a reason why they have different load factors and we're not using kind of an importance factor type approach?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it shows great insight in awareness of LRFD. I think we were taking the approach, let's keep it simple out of the gate.
Okay, understood. And then for the NESC loads, do those load factors and strength factors that are in the NEC have targeted beta factors that have been computed already that are available to be referenced, if not as like a, this is the way we should do it, because I know California is different than other places, but as a, do they have like, the beta factor for 1.5 and whatever the equivalent pole already pre-calculated, or did they take a similar approach when transitioning?
Yeah, so they took a very similar approach in terms of calibrating as a first step, calibrating to what had previously been in the NASC. They didn't use safety factors. They used a term that was called an overload capacity factor. So if you look back several editions ago in the NESC, the overload capacity factor for wood poles would be 4.0. So it's identical to GEO95. So as I understand the evolution of the NESC, the first step was to get the LRFD framework in place. And now there are proposals. So we're really going to chase a rabbit with this, but the ultimate embodiment of LRFD is that behind the scenes, there is a design process known as reliability-based design. And in reliability-based design, that's when you're looking at things like the importance factors, what return period you're going to use for wind and ice loading, what the coefficient of variation is for material strengths and so forth, to derive things like those beta factors. The NESC is not there yet, but that work is just beginning with the NESC committees to look at implementation, potentially still years away, of reliability-based design principles. And that's when the load and resistance factors will begin to get refined further.
Understood. So the NESC, like oftentimes, like when I've seen stuff like this implemented in other sets of codes, there is a pretty long, like ASCE will do a reliability-based design guide that they kind of like put together. That's kind of like the first step here. Has that occurred yet? In terms, okay. So
no, there are. So dating back to the early 1980s, the Electric Power Research Institute sponsored research with Johns Hopkins, University of Wisconsin, and Colorado State University to actually develop reliability-based design procedures for transmission lines, not distribution, but for transmission lines. In many ways, that work set the stage, even though it was, 40 years ago. That is the work that set the stage for the morphing of the NESC. But we're just now at the point where LRFD has been incorporated into the NESC, and the reliability principles are yet to be incorporated. So that's what's on the table now. It's been a long journey.
And I see Thomas Roberts has his hand up as well. So I'm going to cede the table to him.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Just barely.
Yes.
Is this a little better?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, my name's Tom Roberts. I'm new to SED on the same team as Fadi, but I wasn't part of the meet and confer, so I'm playing catch up like probably some others on the call are as well. I think Henry's questions and these slide decks were very helpful to understand. I think what was a basic point that was clear in the petition that what is proposed currently would not, or is promoted as not changing the safety that's built into GEO 95 because you're calibrating to provide the equivalence of the safety factors that are there now. And, but both the petition and Andy's comments made it clear that this is just the first step in what you plan to do. So the first thing I just wanted to confirm is that from the Rule Committee's perspective, this OIR would result in changes that would keep level of safety. And it would be some future proceeding that might go beyond that with new data to provide more specialized load and strength factors. So do I have that point correct?
Yes. Yes, you do.
Okay, great. And then while this was going on, I had actually the question I was going to ask is, if there isn't going to be a change in the level of safety provided by GEO 95, then why go through the months of work now? I mean, I understand the value of having the framework in place, and we've already got the OIR, but it would seem like it would have also been an option to go through this process when we were actually going to have new numbers that might have a potential safety impact. Because as it is now, it seems like the commission is being asked to implement a framework and go over lots of what's discussed so far. So I guess that's more of a comment, but I just want to make sure I understood the full scope of the OIR is a stepping stone to future plans.
Sure, and I think I can give you a pretty general answer for the Rules Committee. We talked about this at the committee level, and it's a question of if not now, when. Like, why would we continue to delay in California to embrace a formulaic approach to design of overhead lines that's already been embraced by the rest of the nation, number one. As I said, we were looking for opportunities to bring this forward a little sooner than 2004 or 2024 rather. And as Andy mentioned, we broached the topic back in 2012, actually, in the fire safety proceeding. But in talking with staff back then, it was apparent that that was not the right time or the right vehicle of the fire safety proceeding to do it. And one of the reasons why we believed it wasn't the right time, Thomas, then, and why we were looking for the right time, is because we recognize as industry that this is a little bit of a culture shock. Like we realize that GEO 95 has had this embedded engineering methodology that predates GEO 95 and dates back to GEO 64A and 64, GEO 64, its predecessor. So we have like 100-year-old type engineering that's become part of the fabric of all of our utilities. And it was a fabric of other utilities before the change to the NESC. So the crawl, walk, run approach to us seemed like the best way to start because of, one, the change to a culture that for generations, this type of engineering and the use of a numerical value to indicate the safety of a material, a pole, guy, a wire, a cross arm, etc., is sort of like baked into the DNA of all of our utilities, and also from the standpoint of the commission in its GOs. And so we believed that a more gradual approach, not identical to, but similar to how it was done on the national level for the national code, was more appropriate to give everybody time to get comfortable with it. I can tell you that from my utilities perspective, the tool that we use to do whole load calculations, its underlying principles of the off-the-shelf tool that we're using has already incorporated LRFD into it, as have many other off-the-shelf tools that are available to utilities to do overhead line design. And so that while the math and the technology is not new to us, the application of the GO95 rules with a safety factor and the evolution and the migration to a load and resistance factor design, we believe that step was so important to get right out of the chute, that we got the methodology right, that we felt like if the commission did embrace it, and we weren't sure that it would, or even take up the matter, that if the commission did deign to adopt the methodology, that the very perhaps next step, and it could be in any time frame, it could be as a subsequent phase to this proceeding, or down the road a ways, that it would give the commission and industry, the utilities, time to say like, okay, we get it, we have the tools, we know how to implement it, we can do it, and then as the next step, go into the other principles that we discussed about how to make sure that from a reliability standpoint or an asset at risk standpoint, that any future adjustments were well understood, both at the national level and both at our state level, and not necessarily do it in lockstep or in combination with the NESC, because they only make change. We only make changes. I say they. I also serve on the NESC, not on the strength and loading subcommittee, but on a different subcommittee. But on a national level, that code cycle is 5 years. California has the opportunity now to embrace the methodology, and when it's ready, start moving forward, perhaps faster and ahead of the NESC, with guidance from many people like Andy, Dr. Slavin, if he's available, and other people that work on the IEEE overhead lines subcommittee as part of IEEE T&D. There are many experts and many committees that we have the opportunity in California, that once the methodology is in place, to then start looking at unique factors, whether it's for wood poles, for steel, for composite, for cross arms, and all the different line elements. So I think we have the opportunity to adopt the methodology and first make sure that we're all on the same page, and then start moving forward. So it seemed to us like the gradual approach was better than a wash all of this out and bring in all brand new information. It just felt to us in industry like that gradual approach made more sense, not just from a regulatory standpoint, but from an operational standpoint and a fundamental design and construction standpoint.
I see the next hand that I see up is Tyler Chamberlain.
Yeah, hi, I am Tyler Chamberlain with Pacific Corp, and excuse this if this is ignorance in my part, but is it also a part of these proceedings, or maybe something prior has been discussed, to have a roadmap beyond the implementation of LRFD?
Well, we haven't, it wasn't proposed by the Rules Committee. That is something typically, Tyler, that we would take up as either industry groups like electric utilities or telecommunication companies, or collaboratively as parties in a rulemaking. That let's just say, for example, the commission said, yes, we want to incorporate LRFD, the methodology, into GO95. At that point in time where the commission was like amenable, then in my opinion, the next step would be for parties to say, well, we shouldn't stop here. We should continue. And because you've asked the question, I just want to circle back to something else I said. It's important to note that what we propose is not a clone or not a clone of the NESC or an NESC Lite. This is simply the methodology. So for those companies like PacifiCorp, where you're at, where you are working in two worlds, Tyler, you've got facilities outside of California that I assume you're designing to meet or exceed the NESC. And then in California, you have to also use or make sure your designs meet or exceed GO95, right? And
right.
PacifiCorp is unique in that, I think. So from your perspective and from industry's perspective, it certainly, in my mind, would be a future step to recommend to the commission that we continue down that path and look at all the options that are made available through LRFD as a methodology, without question. But it wasn't the intent of the Rules Committee to foresee every single change in every single particular regulatory stepping stone to get there. That wasn't our role. That's more the roles of the companies.
Sure. Thanks for explaining that.
Sure.
And I see Steve Bowen has his hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, Sam. And Steve Bowen, outside counsel for Sonic Telecom. I'm curious to know whether or not, and again, I'm keying off of the last couple of questions and kind of the core of Andy's presentation here. Have you all discussed in the GO95 committee whether or not when you get to step 2 and begin to actually, kick in the value of LRFD, whether you're going to, on a California basis, are you going to allow differentiation by company or not? That is, could Edison say, hey, I want to have this different wind load from SDG&E or from PG&E? Or do you see this being carried forward as GO95 is right now on a statewide basis that's equally applicable to any pole owner?
Well, I can hazard an answer just, for me. I'm not speaking for Edison or any other members of the Rules Committee, but I can tell you that in our discussions on that, and just, my personal point of view, is that the commission considered the necessity and need and value of having its own new wind maps at the end of the fire safety proceeding, as you may recall. And right now, the utilities are using their own wind maps. There are wind maps available that are created through ASCE, I believe. And we have Dr. Slavin on the call, who has forgotten more about a lot of these topics than I'll ever know. But just at a high level, I don't think that the Rules Committee had anything in mind as far as like downstream, should we have a new like homogeneous map for different zones within California. We talked about, the need for that and the value of that. But as it stands today, Edison looks at the GOs and the requirements as the prescribed minimums, and then as necessary and as needed and as like we have understanding, we do and apply different ice loads at different altitudes, different wind loads in different locations than the minimums in Rule 43. So I think our expectation as a committee is that if the commission wanted to go down with new ice and wind maps, I don't think our expectation isn't to do that necessarily for the committee or the commission. I think that might be a little outside the technical expertise of the committee. But I think right now this was just only submitted under the current status quo of the everybody has their own wind maps. There could be additional ice loads that companies apply at different elevations than are prescribed in Rule 43.
Yeah, thank you. I'm thinking more, and the wind load is kind of the obvious thing to talk about to differentiate. But if the commission were to adopt LRFD and then say that's the first step, you could potentially, if they allowed it, modify any of the load or resistance factors if they give you the right to do that, right?
I think they would be me personally, and I think the committee in general, look at the rules as de minimis. It's like you have to at least meet this. But we're under Rule 31.1 as needed, or as you have knowledge, you need to be doing more. And I think most companies recognize that and have embraced that. If they haven't, then they should probably rethink their approach to overhead line design. It's a personal opinion. So I think in all that circumstance, at least from my company's perspective, with or without LRFD, we're going to look at LRFD as simply the methodology, but the intended outcome is to always meet or exceed not whatever is required, but what is needed in a particular place for a particular reason. It could be wind, it could be ice, it could be, any number of things. But the LRFD is just the math to make sure that you know that you've met or exceeded the requirements. And that's really all we were getting at as industry, was just also so that the math. I think Andy had to drop, so I don't want to put anybody else on the spot. But we have Randy Hopkins from PG&E on, who's well versed in this and is also, I think, a current or former member of the IEEE Overhead Lines Subcommittee. When you look at this holistically, like, there's always something that is being investigated, worked on by very smart engineers in this field. And as that information and as that technology and the ability to apply it comes along, we want to be able to do it. We want to be able to apply it. And it's much easier to apply in our world of overhead line design if we're talking apples to apples. And so if the rest of the country and industry is using LRFD and we're trying to do ASD here in California, it's a very, I don't say impossible, but it's a very difficult mesh of new information and the new approaches to overhead line design, trying to mesh that into a California utility if we're not using LRFD. So we found, just holistically, we just felt like it balanced the playing field and balanced the engineering playing field for us as more information and better information and new technologies came along.
Oh yeah, I get that, and thank you. And so last question, if you know, the NESC adoption of LRFD, does it allow variance by state or by company, or is it just, okay, here's LRFD? If you're an FCC state, does it allow variation by state or by company? Do you know?
No, it doesn't.
And not the code itself. Dr. Slave is 100% right. The code itself is the code. The variable is whether or not the state adopts the NESC, right, and which version it adopts.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Slavin.
And I see Randy has his hand up. I want to make sure.
Yeah, and we may have moved beyond that part of the conversation, but I just wanted to weigh in on what Sam was saying. I don't think there's any movement on the part of the IOUs to revise the requirements in the general order to design for known local conditions. That's why, SCE and PG&E have snow loading maps and they have their own wind loading maps. because we are required by the general order, and the engineers want to design by the general order for known local conditions. It'd be foolish not to. So there's no movement to get rid of those requirements that I'm aware of on the part of PG&E.
If there is such a movement, I'd like to believe I would know about it.
Thanks, Sam.
Sure. Okay. Other questions? Well, we're pretty much on time. If it pleases the group, I'd like to continue now with the agenda. I think for sure Andy is gone. He said he had a hard stop at 12. And so I think I will try to represent or reshare here. Let's see if I can make sure I get to see if I can find a thing here. Window. Here we go. I don't think anybody wants to see my cluttered calendar. Oh, here we go. All right. So Henry, can you see my Word doc again?
I can see it.
Okay. Well, with the group's consent, I'll continue with the agenda. And also, even though he's already left, I do appreciate Andy Stewart giving us that presentation. I hope it was informative. And I was glad, Henry, that he could answer your questions that you asked of me that I knew I couldn't answer. So I'm glad he was on there, and that you were speaking his love language. I know engineers have a peculiar bent on facts, figures, and numbers that I just do not have. So I'm glad we could get there for you. So just to try to get towards the end here, perhaps we can wrap it up before 12:30 or by 12:30, and if possible, then we will. But I don't want to rush through if we don't need to. So I put in a workshop report, and I put in Roman numeral 5 with 3 numbers and some subparts. I put in a link to a workshop report from a previous GEO95 rulemaking. And in that rulemaking, if you did open it, or you saw the link and you opened it, or if you open it now, you'll go to the Commission's website, I think, and you'll get to the workshop report page as a PDF. And if you open and scroll through it, I believe you'll see some proposed rule changes and some voting blocks, and how we came about in the workshop report presentation with some other appendices, and the kind of content that I think I would expect to see in this proceeding, where you have, a fair number of rules. In that particular rulemaking, the proposed rule changes were fairly diverse and not focused on one particular topic. But each of the topics, each of the proposed rule changes separately or lumped in together where we were able to, were voted on once, and then as a preliminary vote, and then a second final vote was taken, and the final votes were set forth in the workshop report. And so you can sort of see like the outlay and content of what a workshop report in this proceeding might look like. It might have some presentation decks, it might have other information, list of parties, list of various lists of things. So just so the Commission had a complete record that meetings did occur, what was talked about, what was voted on, and then the way those workshop reports work, the proposed rule changes as voted on by parties would still then be decided upon by the committee or the Commission. It wouldn't be like, okay, here's the new rule just because the parties met in a workshop and voted them out and reached consensus. Even consensus proposed rule changes, and particularly non-consensus proposed rule changes where there are alternatives, the Commission still makes the final decision whether or not to adopt them or not, or further modify them, or there's still a lot of decisions to be done by the Commission after the workshop report is completed. So the workshop report is really just the record of what the parties met, discussed, and found consensus on or didn't find consensus on. It's by no means the end product. People that have worked on these proceedings before, I think, are very familiar with that. But if you're not, there's an example of what we would send to the commission, and they would have to sort through and make a decision on the results of workshops. In these workshop reports, the way these come about is members of the workshop teams, could be technical, legal, regulatory folks. I personally have found a lot of value when I have chaired the workshop report writing team of leaning on the wordsmiths in our industry, which are typically attorneys, and letting them help shape the narrative and making sure that we express what happened in the workshops, both the technical and the regulatory legal workshops. And like I said, it's not a courtroom proceeding type document. It's just typically in the last few workshops that I've worked on and reports that we've written, it's been pretty much just straight reporting. And then we let the content of the appendices and the votes and the comments afterwards on the workshop reports and the comments to the commission do the persuading that the workshop report is just a report, and that the team members come from the parties. And on certain workshop reports that we've worked on, we circulate that work product of the workshop report to the parties prior to submission to the commission, to make sure that if there was a special point of concern or a special issue that one party or multiple parties they had the opportunity to review it in advance and make sure that what they submitted to the workshop report team was correctly inserted, and that the material in there represented their view as they saw it, so that everybody had an accurate report of everybody's position. And that can usually take a week or two. So I put this in just sort of as a throwaway point of discussion. I think all this can also be addressed in comments, but in the scoping memo of the commission, to Jerome's point earlier, very often it takes several weeks to consolidate all the information that was developed during a workshop and to put it in some sort of format just to get it out to the parties to make sure that they saw that all the positions were represented correctly, the votes were right, their positions, etc. So to Jerome's point earlier about a 10-day post after the final workshop, when the workshop report should be submitted, I think in comments, parties could tell the commission, look, it's going to take 30 to 45 days after the last technical workshop and after the last vote to get together a workshop report that is complete and accurate and reviewed by parties prior to submission. And in the past, the parties to the workshops have wanted a chance to review it to make sure that it went in and that everybody was satisfied with the content. And by the way, not everybody will be satisfied with the content, because some parties will want to have like a 5-page dissertation on why they didn't like a particular rule change. But we, in the past, have sort of guided that should be comments after the workshop report. So it can be a time-consuming process. And I would say minimum 30 days and even better 45 days after the last workshop to get the workshop report to the commission. And so that was really the only last thing I had to say about that. I had an item I here after the 12:30 time frame on the agenda in case we needed it, but I don't think we're going to go there based on Commissioner Baker's comments about this being focused on LRFD. But I don't want to give any of the parties that are on the call, that join the call, that might want to talk about next steps. Also, we had a question about like, well, if we're just doing LRFD crawl, like the initial methodology in there, should there be some discussion about next steps after, assuming LRFD methodology is adopted, is there a reason to talk about future steps with that? I want to tee that up. I'll tell you my opinion. The answer is yes, but typically these things are up to the commission to decide timing. But if you want the commission to consider it, that should probably be in comments as well. I don't know how else you could inform the commission that there's a long range vision for LRFD or so forth. The Rules Committee, as I said, did not do that because that's not their role. That's the role of the companies, we believe. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, Sam, I did know I didn't see any hands on anyone's comments on how you saw the workshops kind of working, but a workshop report working. But I wanted to make sure we circled back and made sure we picked up if anyone had any comments on any additional comments, or they can be saved for comments on the workshop, on this workshop report, if they have seen effective methods of doing workshop report beyond what you just stated. So if you don't mind, if we can just pause on that for a second. I don't see any hands. I note, Drew, I think as you noted, Jerome's comment from earlier, that they do take a while to write.
They do. So, and while we're pausing, letting people collect their thoughts or figure out how to raise their hand on this WebEx, I would also say that I don't believe our intent as the IOUs, and if an attorney for one of the IOUs or regulatory person wants to override what I'm going to tell you, they're certainly welcome to. But I don't believe we were planning on circulating a draft of this to the parties within the 10-day time period we had before filing it. I think our intent here was just to do straight reporting. We have a recording of it now that's going on this WebEx. I don't know if the recording will be written transcript and tacked on as an appendice or not. I don't know that we know that yet, but I don't believe our plan was to circulate this to parties prior to submittal. That this part of the submittal part in this agenda was talking about future technical workshops, not this one.
Yeah, thank you. Good point. I see Josh has his hand raised. I'm not hearing you, Josh.
Sorry, you think after all these years of these WebEx
there you go.
and Teams meetings that I'd have this down. So sorry about that. I just wanted to support the kind of the past process we've followed in the the pole safety proceeding and others. It's the approach that you've said, Sam, seems consistent with what we've done in the past, and it was effective. So since the question was asked, I wanted to give my 2 cents.
I appreciate that. Yeah, any and all support is appreciated, Josh.
Cool. I'm not seeing any other hands up for this. So with that, I know you kind of already kicked off item I, and definitely we're looking to, if anyone has any related procedural matters to adopting LRFD, I'm definitely looking forward to hear. I think, as Sam said, we decided to hold off on that top bullet due to SED's objections, but we already were able to cover that second bullet. So I'm not sure if there were any other type of items that we should bring up.
Yeah. Anything else for the good of the group? Other than that, my agenda is complete. Waiting for hands, but if there are none, Henry, then I'll defer to you and anybody else from the commission that thinks that we need to have some closing comments or admonitions for us prior to after the workshop report, or up until that point for this workshop.
Well, thank you. I'm not seeing any hands, so with that, I think we can go ahead and close the workshop. And we've recorded this. I believe it is our intent to post it online so that it can be watched for future generations, but so that other people that weren't able to attend can see it. So look forward to that on the service list. But thank you to
Okay,
Sam.
I'll have to talk to my and thank you. I'll have to talk to my legal department about submitting a strongly worded protest to having Sam Stonerock show so readily available for people to watch. I don't remember signing a consent form, but I guess that just goes with the territory. But thank you, Henry, for reminding me this is now into posterity. That's a scary thought. But thank you. Really appreciate your support and help as getting this going. Any other closing comments, guys, from the parties or my group? If not, then I'm gonna give you back. It looks like 9 minutes of our day, and we can go to lunch. All right. I think we are adjourned.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Have a good one.
Thank you.